Machines of machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine. One emits a flux which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth a machine coupled to that one. The mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a talking machine, a breathing machine, deeper machine, asthma, attack. This is why we are all tinkerers, each with their own little machines. An organ machine for an energy machine. There are always flux and cuts. Judge Schreber 5 has divine rays in his ass. Solar anus. And rest assured it works. Judge Schreber feels something, produced of something, and theorized about it. Something is being deduced effects of machines, not metaphors. Of the schizophrenic. It's a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. A bit of fresh air, a relationship with the outside. Take the stroll of Lenz into the outdoors. It is different from moments when Lenz finds himself with his good pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially in relation to God, in relation to Father, in relation to Mother. On the contrary, he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods, or without God at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my Father want? Can he give me better? Impossible! Leave me alone. Everything is a machine. And three celestial machines, the stars are rainbows, alpine machines, each coupled with those of his body, noise machine. Uninterrupted, idling to mutter. It must feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound, life profound to every form. To have a soul for the rocks, metals, water, and plants, to welcome into oneself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. Både vilket landskap ger sig till where, både där i multidagen ned, innen the replies. Krongas can be a chlorophyllin machine or a photosynthesis machine, or at least slip his body as a part into such machines. Lenz put himself before the distinction of man-nature, before all the identifications that this distinction conditions. He could not experience nature as nature, but as a process of production. There is no more man nor nature, only process that produces the one within the other and couples the machines together. Producing machine, desiring machine everywhere, schizophrenic machines, all generic life. Me and not me, exterior and interior don't mean anything anymore. That was me. Anti-Oediping. That was me. Anti-Oediping. The desiring machines. Machines.
The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make us see the billows.
I'm muted. Hello, everyone out there in YouTube land. I hope all of you are well. Sorry I'm a little late today, and I'm also obviously scattered as I'm trying to get this goddamn thing going. It has been a weird 9 days, but I cannot forget my true love, my main love, which is spending 2 hours reading 2 paragraphs and discussing them with myself dryly over YouTube and Discord as it's recorded for all 12 of you who give a shit to read. We are in the second task. We are heading towards finally the final points of this goddamn book and the final sort of theses that they've got about schizoanalysis and the last bits as we sort of make our way through all of this. The last thesis of schizoanalysis is what we're going to be covering today. I'll be sharing all of that, LJ. And I'll be talking about that kind of randomly. It's been a very strange few days. The CBC is going to have a thing out later today. If you haven't heard, we've got OperationInflation.com going, and it's turned out to be what was going to be a 2 or 3 day lark of a joke, quick thing, turned out to be a globally transformative movement. So let no one ever tell you that the stupid, dumb shit that 1 or 2 people might do is actually important, and that you can actually make change by doing really dumb shit as 1 or 2 people. Someone wrote and commented that Guattari would be proud, and that made me feel really cool. That one geeked me out. That one's good shit. We're making our way through the 4th and final thesis of schizoanalysis, and as we've gone through, we'll go over after this all of the theses of schizoanalysis. Don't worry. We'll be going through all of those after this, making sure that we're able to get through them, making sure all of you understand them, making sure we're not fucking around very much, because the whole goal here is, again, that understanding. So as we go, globally, on No King's Day, the American embassies in multiple countries were protested by 2 dozen inflatable animals. Dublin was filled with it. So yes, globally, weird shit. It's been very weird, Wig. It's been very weird. But reading. I'll talk about Operation Inflation after this, because there's a whole bunch of stuff to update there, and I've got to figure out, how I talk about it here at the QC, because one of the rules I've had about the QC is that I talk about QC stuff here, and it's personal too, because that tends to involve stuff, and this is like in and out of that, so we'll have a conversation around all that. It's been very strange. But today we're going to be reading about the 4th and final thesis of schizoanalysis, and we'll be explaining it as we go through, and then we'll be going back and forth over all the other theses. So, without further ado, I'm just going to fucking dive right the goddamn fuck into this. Off we go. The 4th and final thesis of schizoanalysis is therefore the distinction between 2 poles of social libidinal investment: the paranoiac, reactionary, and fascizing pole, and the schizoid, revolutionary pole. Once again, we see no objection to the use of terms inherited from psychiatry for characterizing social investments of the unconscious, insofar as these terms cease to have a familial connotation that would make them into simple projections, And from the moment delirium is recognized as having a primary social content that is immediately adequate. The two poles are defined, the one by the enslavement of production and the desiring machines to the gregarious aggregates that they constitute on a large scale under a given form of power or selective sovereignty. The other by the inverse subordination and the overthrow of power. The one by these molar structured aggregates that crush singularities, select them, regularize those that they retain in codes or axiomatics. The other by the molecular multiplicities of singularities, that on the contrary treat the large aggregates as so many useful materials for their own elaborations. The one by the lines of integration and territorialization that arrest the flux, constricts them, turns them back, breaks them again according to the limits interior to the system, in such a way as to produce the images that come to fill the field of immanence peculiar to this system or this aggregate. The other by lines of escape that follow the decoded and deterritorialized flux, inventing their own non-figurative breaks or schizzes that produces new flux, always breaching the coded wall or the territorialized limit that separates them from desiring production. I just realized I haven't switched scenes. I am an awful host. So none of you have been reading along with me. That's okay. We'll be going through it moment by moment. Inventing their own non-figurative breaks or schizzes that produces new flux, always breaching the coded wall or the territorialized limit that separates them from desiring production. And to summarize all the preceding determinations, the one is defined by subjugated groups, the other by subject groups. It is true that we still run up against all kinds of problems concerning these distinctions. In what sense does the schizoid investment constitute, to the same extent as the other one, a real investment of the socio-historical field, and not a simple utopia? In what sense are the lines of escapes collective, positive, and creative? What is the relationship between the two unconscious poles, and what is their relationship with the pre-conscious investments of interest? It wasn't intentional, I just deeply apologize. Literally, my brain has to switch so many gears to do this, and I just am just out of habit enough, so apologies. But we're going to go bit by bit. And as we talk through this, remember, they're trying to talk about how we can understand the pathology, the psychology of the human experience and setup that isn't focused on starting from the familial aggregate, from the images we have of it, the symbolic, and instead can become an understanding that is about the emergent, the singularities, as they call them, and the elements there. And they open, just really, really simply, again, talking about the two poles of social libidinal investment. On the one hand, and again, two poles, think of it as magnetic. There's a reason they use these terms. They don't mean anything except the way that they're talking about it. It's positive and negative poles. Magnets have this. Every magnet really has this. Electrical currents have this. Like, they're speaking in these terms not as metaphor. It's not metaphor. They're speaking directly about them. So the distinction exists between two poles. One paranoiac, reactionary fascising, the other schizoid revolutionary. So the way that they sort of talk about this, the way they're setting up is that there is, in this capacity, and again, it's the two poles, think magnetically, there is a binary framework of sorts for understanding how the unconscious elements, the forces, the impulses of the unconscious actually invest in social formations. Not that they are either of these poles. Think of them again as attractant poles. There is no such thing as a magnet that is positive. There's the positive and negative pole. No force is positive. We talk about it like that because the positive outweighs, but there's still a negative force. There's still this is still the thing. This is why they're using this terminology. They want us to be talking about that, right? So we have these two opposing vectors. One of those poles tends toward the paranoid, conservative, reactionary, proto-fascist organization of things. There's the molar, the state, for example, organization, hierarchy, these things. The other tends towards the schizophrenic, the revolutionary, molecular, the deterritorializing, right? Hoping everyone's following. Because at this point, we've talked about these various elements because they want us to start with. The first thesis and setup is that there is a distinction between desiring and social production. Not in terms of like function or all of those things. Everything is desiring production. Social production is desiring production under determinate conditions. But there is a distinction between them. There's a distinction between the molecular and the molar, the million parts of things, or the mole, the collection, the organism and things, and the way that these interplay, particularly how people are invested or interested in them, and how these things come together. And that's kind of what they're setting in. Now, they're being specific. Once again, we see no objection to use these terms. The terms of paranoiac, the term of they've used the pervert, they've used narcissist, whatever it may be, or the unconscious, or any of this. They don't mind using these terms, despite the origin of them being in Freud's hyperfamilialist or Lacan's hyperfamilialist psychoanalytic writing. That's fine. They don't mind using the terms because they've garnered a meaning. They're useful. But we must do so, as they say, only if they cease to have the familial connotations that make them into a simple projection. So while they appropriate these clinical categories, and they do so as part of the political or social analysis, it's only when they are stripped of all of their Oedipal reductions. Remember, delirium is social and historical. Understandings of the world are social historical. It's not within the individual. It's not displaced familial dramas or at all, or any of these things. When a delirious subject, as the phrasing that a lot of these guys use when they talk about this, the delirious subject, the person who's being analyzed or any of that, when these people talk about judges or police, when they talk about the race that they are, the religion that they are, and they're doing so in these delirious ways, these crazy ways, what they actually are speaking about is the actual object of their unconscious investment. It is not a symbolic substitute for a failed relationship with mom or dad, or a structural failure with mom and dad. They're actually talking about the thing. What they speak about is the actual object of it. And you must strip it of mommy daddy. You must strip it of this other larger connotation that just sits within psychoanalytic thought. And that's their core argument of this. If you've done that, then they go on. The two poles, as they talk about it, two poles are defined, and they go through a lot of different groupings here. There's some odd choices. I'm going to skip the translation errors. There's some odd strengthening or movement, but they talk about the two poles in contrast to each other. Again, think of them as forces. Think of them as attractant forces, tendencies of things. The two poles are defined. The one, and when I say the one and I go like this, I mean the fascist pole. The one by the subjugation of production and desiring machines, to the gregarious aggregates, to the herd, the crowd, that they constitute on a large scale under a given form of power or selective sovereignty. When we talk about the crowd, or what is an American? What is an American? This is the easiest way to talk about it. The enslavement of production desiring machines. To gregarious aggregates, we are Americans. That's there's Americans. That's a designative category that I think can make sense. It's people who reside in America. Now, what does that mean? Well, at a large scale, there are Americans. Now, the question is, Are we using that as a descriptive term or a prescriptive term? If it's descriptive, it's kind of got a lot of possible meanings and a lot of setups. But that thing is actually not just existing. There isn't actually an American standing around. What's happening is the molecular elements, lots of people, lots of circumstances, lots of partial objects, lots of whatever it is, combine to form this large scale that exists under particular forms of power or a selective sovereignty. And people who take that large name, that gregarious aggregate, and they use it to crush the emergence of things. They use it to crush the emergence of desire. That is the one pole. The other pole, the other by the inverse subordination, which means subordinating the aggregate, the gregarious aggregate, the molar, to the molecular. The enslavement of production desiring machines on one side, or the enslavement of the gregarious aggregates to desiring production on the other. This is the setup. The paranoid pole, the fascizing pole, operates by capturing and crushing desiring production. This is what they've spent the entire book, I believe, doing an excellent job proving out, that these large-scale social formations of state, capital, church, party, whatever it is, any of these things, these are herd assemblages, Nietzsche stuff, that organize under particular contingent forms of power. And these things select desire that is allowed to continue, permitted desire, and not permitted forces, not wants. We're not talking about personal wants, we're talking about pre-personal desire. Those large aggregates force it. Think of conservatives who continually have and are caught with gay porn despite being absolutely the Christian white man with the family and the 2 kids who screams about how important that is. This is desires that are permitted, are determined by the herd mentality on the paranoiac side. The schizoid pole inverts this. Instead of desiring machines in service of power, or you might say selected, separated, and stymied and crushed by power, power is subordinated and ultimately dissolved, actually, by the potential of desiring production, by the openness and emergence to the world as it exists. I mean, I think that's like my favorite sentence about this. They give a handful of other examples very quickly, but before I move on, is this so far making general clarity sense with you people? What do you mean by you people? You know what I mean. Clearly, everyone agrees with me. I like that. That's fantastic. I appreciate that everyone is just, wow, that's a lot of just resounding applause. Love it. I love it. I can do it. All right. All right. Fair enough. I'm not going to force it on anyone, obviously, but that's the jam. But to continue, they say, the one, and again, the paranoiac pole, by these molar structured aggregates that crush singularities, select them, regularize those that they retain in codes or axiomatics. The other, by the molecular multiplicities of singularities that, on the contrary, treat the large aggregates as so many useful materials for their own elaborations. I fucking love the phrasing on this. I really do. Again, the 2 poles, and again, think of it as magnetic poles. This isn't black and white. There's a lot of forces coming through all of this. The paranoiac pole operates through molar, remember molar, big, large-scale organized statistical quantities and structures that destroys individual singularities. And singularities are tiniest little bits and moments. It's a whole thing. These things then get filtered, right, through this sieve, this filtering process where they are selected. They're then normalized, regularized is the words they use, because they're passed through this coding in the primitive and the despotic, or the axiomatization via capitalism that regularizes them, that makes them normative and bends them that way. The schizoid pole, the other side of things, this operates molecularly at the level of intensive elements, pre or way sub pre-individual. Like, this isn't class interest, this is like way deeper. This is way deeper. It is in the forces themselves and the multiplicities of singularities that are kind of, that are all the building blocks that these large things are made of, right? But the building blocks can make that large thing do different shit. And it does on that pole of things. It fucks with large structures for its own emergent creative processes, rather than being determined by them. Right? It's kind of a big deal when we start getting forward, so hopefully all of you are following. There's no quiz, so it doesn't matter. But still. The one, paranoiac, by the lines of integration and territorialization that arrest the flux, constrict them, turn them back, break them again according to the limits interior to the system, in such a way as to produce the images that come to fill the field of eminence peculiar to this system or this aggregate. The other, by lines of escape that follow the decoded and deterritorialized flux, inventing their own non-figurative breaks or schizzes that produce new flux, always breaching the coded wall or the territorialized limit that separates them from desiring production. The paranoid pole. Again, they're just running through all of it because if the language they're using, if you can't see, is literally from like chapters 2 and 3, also parts of 1, but mostly 2 and 3, and they're pulling all of that language, the terms that they've reapplied and concepts they've built. Again, territorialization or deterritorialization is more of a social anthropology term than one that's commonly used as a concept philosophically, or at least it was when they were doing this. They're bringing all of these things back in and trying to plainly lay out the way that these poles operate and the way that they sort of interact. So the paranoid pole on the one side, again, the one, integrates, territorializes. These are processes that stop, constrain, redirect, and segment, right? Because the way that systems exist is they have boundaries. They have edges. What is a box? A box is whatever you just thought of. That's a box, which kind of limits what a box can be. And you select and choose the things that sort of can go into that box, or how that box might work, or what it's made of, or all these things. The representational images that are generated through these processes, right? We might say ideology, we might call it that. These are images generated. Phantasms is Klosowski's term for it, but these are the images of things, the spectacle, for example, signification for Lacan and a handful of others. These things saturate the plane of social existence that exists within capitalism, despotism, or other contingent sort of things. Whatever the aggregate formation is in structure, is saturated by the images like that. And these images are used in this process. The schizoid pole, very different. Very, very different. It works via lines of flight. And these lines of flight are not the same thing as a closed image. They're, I would almost say, more nonsensical, playing in a different way. They don't have those predetermined setups. An example would be dude in a fucking inflatable costume at a protest and how that fits. These are decoded, deterritorialized flux of direct investment, creating their own abstract, their own non-representational ruptures. Okay? And those ruptures generate flux themselves, new flux that in turn generate their own ruptures. This process is self-creating, self-forming, breaking through codes or territories, that generally separate desire at a social level from its sort of productive potential as they're laying it out here, right? And they continue, to summarize all the preceding determinations, the one is defined by subjugated groups, the other by subject groups. This is incredibly important. Guattari has a concept called a groupuscule, which is really the worst fucking name I've heard of it. And I get the idea. It's the idea of a molecule, a groupuscule. All I can think is that it's like a barnacle or corpuscle, or like, so for some reason, I don't like the sound of it. But the concept's phenomenal. When we talk about how we exist socially, we're either part of a subject group or a subjugated group. Okay? And all of the paranoid and schizo things we're talking about here, all of these things that are happening with these two poles can ultimately be condensed into this group formulation that Guattari came up with, right? You have subjugated groups. This is one you're going to definitely be more familiar with. These are collectives of people who understand what the group is, that the group has a hierarchy in some capacity. It doesn't have to be hardened, just that there is certain people who are more in charge than others, right? People who are better at it, people who are more skilled, people who are naturally the leader, whatever you want to say. Anarchist groups fall into this, these are groups that have some level of organization, that are subjected themselves to external goals. They don't have goals within themselves. They're externally motivated and therefore sort of open to a lot of things. They have fixed identities as a group. They've been totalized or are totalized. They have roles within it that are known. Things that reproduce dominant social systems inside of the group. This is a subjugated group. You belong to many of these. So do I. So do all of us. Subjugated groups are things, and this is, again, Guattari's theory of idea of groups is phenomenal in this sense. It lets you really understand, because it's not that you are a group, a subjugated group. You go wherever you go around. You're a fucking dude, or dudette, or non-dude, non-binary dude also works. But you're going between thing to thing. Are you a gamer? Are you a anarchist? Are you a protester? Are you an organizer? Are you a student? I mean, yes, sure. Grab a few of these things, put them together. Some of these are subjugated groups. Most of the ones I just mentioned are. They're groups that exist externally. They exist for external goals. But you move between things, and sometimes you kind of join a thing and you're part of it, but it's not a thing. I think of Black Lives Matter when it first started as my go-to example for that. And I know it's aging now, so not everyone necessarily even remembers, but when it first started, it was kind of like, hey, people are outside marching. Oh, it's about that. Let's go. This is a subject group. A subject group is a different beast. These are collectives that have as their makeup active subjects that are actively enunciating themselves, that are self-organized or almost auto-organized as a thing. They're experimental. They don't know what the fuck is going on. They have a membership that people go in and out of. Operation Inflation is this. This is our goal is to try to build a proper subject group protest movement, because you join by putting on the outfit. You leave by not doing that. And you can kind of do that for whatever. There's a fluidity to joining or not. There's not a organized hierarchy. It doesn't exist as a thing. It's experimental, and it produces entirely new ways of how we relate to each other. Subject groups operate like this. It will become a subjugated group, I have no doubt. We're trying to stave it off. It's going to happen. But this setup of these two things, we move between these all the time. We are, as Guattari talked about, a groupuscule. We attach to this, and then this, and then this, and we constantly are shifting our way and relations between multiple groups in this sense. Multiple groups. And that's the phrasing that they're talking about, that they're saying. The one is defined by subjugated groups, the other by subject. And they're open. Gamers are subjugated by NVIDIA. Well, gamers is actually a really good example of how this transition happens. When I was in high school, or even younger, people played video games. That's like the end of the conversation. There wasn't a gamer. Gamer wasn't a thing. And there wasn't really there was a kid who claimed his uncle worked at Nintendo or he was the one who beat whatever. But everyone just kind of played games. They just did that. At some point, gamer became and geek and nerd became a fucking personality that people developed and rules around it sprang up. And then you'd have the kings of geeks and you'd have like Will Wheaton or some other fucking celebrity who knew they could jump on the dork fucking craze and make a bunch of money. And as these things hardened, here's what a true gamer is. And then Gamergate, of course, added this. But that collapse from just, hey, we all do this thing, to I'm a gamer. Subjugated, subject, these things and how they play is kind of how this works. And this distinction in the way they're laying out, they're very open to it. Because they're like, hey, look, there is a difficulty and complexity with this distinction. Because when we talk about pools of investments and we set this up into this binary, we know we've said a lot of shit and talked shit about binaries. So like, again, they know it's not exactly like a settled science or like this is the truth always, this binary schema. That's not it. It's that there's a lot of elaboration and a lot of problems that actually pop up. And they actually lay a handful of them out. It's the first problem they bring up here. I'm not going to read it exactly, but the first problem they come up with is, how can this revolutionary pole be understood as actually unconscious rather than an idealized imaginary projection? That the challenge is materialism, actually, would be the way I'd phrase that. How do you know revolutionary desire is not simply wishful thinking? It's a really good question, by the way, right? Like, how do you know that? Because if you're talking about these processes and how they're set up, and this one over here is this idealized thing, well, it's a little utopian. It pushes that way. How do you know it's actually there rather than an actual force? How are lines of flight not merely the escape of an individual via private psychosis, via personal deprivation, via personal repression, or even a psychotic break? How do you know they're not that and that they are a genuine collectivity or a moment or event for the collective? How is it that these things are not purely negative given the result and the way that the outcome happens when you have the line of flight that is the subject that breaks all social ties becomes the clinical entity of the extreme autism shutdown subject? Like, how do you know it's destructive? Why are you saying it's affirmative at this point? How are these things not merely repeating the same shit over and all? How is it opening up new possibilities inside of all of this? And ultimately, the last point, what is the relationship between the two unconscious poles? And what is their relationship with the preconscious investments of interest? These things don't exist in vacuums. Nothing in this book is meant to be taken as, yes, this is the fundamental thing that doesn't touch anything else. All of it does. All of it interacts. All of it has, especially like this thing specifically has a reciprocal determination, like a dialectical almost, between the paranoid and schizoid poles of unconscious investments, which is one of the other things we talked about, one of the other statements. Like they're saying, how do we get through this? And all of this, as they're sort of driving through, is because they're laying out in this step of schizoanalysis the 4 theses. And that's where we're going to take a moment to go through, because they're before we get to the paragraph where they go through them, I want to talk about each of them and make sure everyone's on board and gets them, because that's kind of the jam we're after. So, is everyone cool? I'm going through a YouTube chat now. Might be a specific example, but in music, a free improv group is kind of a good example of this emergent way of interacting. Actually, an improv group is like a phenomenal Zorn. So Jack, who's in the server and used to do a bunch of literature readings and now is like a professional human out in the real world. Thanks, world. Introduced me to Zorn. Zorn's like this crazy jazz nutcase who's like a visionary. Jazz improvisation's fascinating. If you haven't done it, I'm a jazz drummer. If you haven't done it, it seems like everything is sort of open-ended. But that's not how it fucking works at all. If you've done enough of it, and if you're with people who maybe have a particular style they like, for example, and you're there and you're open and you're just going, you will end up playing really trite garbage. There's kind of a really weird way that improv works. This is, if you've ever actually done improv, those awful improv groups like Pizza Party Weekend at the local theater company. It's just my favorite fake name for these groups. It's the same thing that improv, we're doing it on the fly. It's completely emergent. Now, why don't you tell me, name a place and a time? What's that? A greengrocer and closing time. Like, they end up with the same shit. They end up doing the same shit. They don't do new, interesting things. In fact, there's a weird way that improv is like collapsing into itself to where it's actually pretty determined by the people who are in charge of the group and the people who are running it. A good improv session, a good jazz improv session can have a Zorn. A Zorn at the front is someone who's doing shit that breaks everyone and forces them to go in weird directions. Zorn has a method where he literally has flashcards that he'll hold up and you do the fucking thing he says and they're nonsense. They're not musical. It's not like he says, okay, switch to this chord at all. Switch to this tempo at all. It's like an up arrow, down arrow, weird names and letters, and they all mean different things to different people. And what it forces is like the entire group to more emergently actually improvise because they're not going off of what is expected. A bad improv group will have a saxophonist at the front who's a fucking egotistical fuck, and everyone else has to get in line because everyone knows they're coming to see that guy. They're not coming to see you. So he's going to lead and he'll turn around and tell you that. So the improv isn't really improv. Every note in an improv, consider a desiring machine. All the music is made of this. It is. But is the music that's being made, the snare, the hi-hat hits I'm making, are these there because of emergent improvisation, trying to figure out what happens without any sort of rules? Or am I doing what is expected and I'm very carefully selecting to make sure I don't upset sax guys so that way I get invited back next week so I might be able to eventually become important? That is the difference. And so improvisation is a phenomenal example of this. And if you watch, I grew up watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's one of my favorite shows. And when Drew Carey brought it back, it was amazing. And all those guys and how they work, you get used to, and they do too. They talk about this. They've all done interviews about this, especially when it was running. You get into a rut. You improvise the same shit. You have a style. And you always have to work to break out of it. You need other people to break you out of it. And if they don't, you harden into that thing. You become that thing. And as shit sort of changes, you don't adjust. You've become subjugated. The desiring production that's working is selected, pieced together, and finding its way out. Not cognitively. No one's sitting there going, okay, so in a few moments, I'm going to make a silly face in a particular way. No, you're responding. Improv is still very on your feet. There's not a lot of thinking or intellectualizing it, but it's still a selection process, and you're still selecting based on all of those pressures. Or those pressures are going away and you're unblocking it, and it changes how people do all of those things. I love Fedor. I love that I have like people in this fucking chat who are like, yes, Zorn. How about Cobra? And they're like, people know this shit because this is the thing. Things get weird and they don't work. That's the point, Fedor, is they don't work. And his point of the piece is that they don't work. It's kind of incredible And his point is what I'm saying, that the best improv is still constricted. It has to be. And it's still crushed. There's no way you can exist in a group that's playing music together or doing anything without accepting crushing. Like, desire machines are going to be crushed in some capacity. But the question is, how are you handling that? Are the larger things pieces you're able to use, in which case you become a Lewis Cole. Sorry, I'm a drummer. You become a Lewis Cole who just uses the absolutely normal pieces of drum, like good drum music and very difficult shit, but he uses them in weird ways that are unexpected, but ways that are predictable and able to be connected to and able to be done with. Or are you doing the same shit that everyone's expecting? Are you letting those larger pieces exist and crush desire? Desire can control that. Desire absolutely can. It's about where you're at. Are you subjugating the molar forms, or are you subjected to it? Yeah. Lewis is fucking crazy, his drum shit, because, and it sounds weird when I say this to people who, like, I took a lot of years of drums. I'm proud of how I'm pretty decent, but people like Lewis make me embarrassed that I call myself a drummer, because he's so understands how these things work together and how they operate. All the pieces of what make drums, like John Bonham, like Led Zeppelin, he kind of just did everything, and everything is sort of pieces of what Bonham did. It's not really true, but like these pieces have all been there. No one's like inventing a new way to play a hi-hat. Not really. Like that shit doesn't happen. But how you arrange these things, how you rebuild them, and how you take those pieces and use them as resources to empower the emergent. Those people are just so next level, and Lewis is up there, easily up there. And there is a paper in French. We actually have a translated version on the QC about Cobra. And it's incredible. Like, it's genuinely like Steve Gadd. There are people who are so good at things, it makes you go, oh, I don't even know what I'm doing. It's so fucking confusing. And it's great. But to the point, the way that improv music or improv anything works is not different than life in this sense. This isn't a metaphor. This is the process. If you were doing improv, either your impulses are being conditioned by the larger story, or the larger story are being broken into pieces that your impulses are using. That's the only two ways people exist ever. Now, this is switching all the time, and there's no one's that all the time. No one's this all the time. Well, some people are that all the time. But like that whole thing, we do have a translate paper somewhere. I'll have to find it. It's like 4.5 years old. It might be in our archive. We do French translations here of shit no one cares about. So it's a weird place. But like, that's the thing. So when you are experiencing life, it is no different. You intellectualize afterwards. Great. But as you're understanding what I'm saying, as you are deciding if you're part of this group or not, or what it means to be at a protest, or what it means to be at work, or how it works, how you do things and what you improvise is either conditioned, selected, chosen by the larger story, or the larger story is being broken into pieces and utilized by the emergent desire. I think I would argue that's like the entire thing. So let's go through the four theses. I'll find it, Fedor. By the way, if you haven't, join the Quarantine Collective on Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. You should be able to find us, and then we'll find it. We translated the paper on Cobra. Sorry for the aside. The QC at this point will never do a reading of 1,000 Plateaus. I am a dictator asshole. It's one of the rules I've set about. We're not going to do it. We may do a reading of one specific part, but even that I hate, because 1,000 Plateaus is literally written to be read by a person and processed by a person in the order that they're experiencing it. It is sheet music for an improv group. And as such, if you have someone telling you, here's what 1,000 Plateaus means, this sentence, as I'm doing with AO is written in a way that this is perfectly fine. This is the way this is working. ATP is not. So how do you do an 1,000 Plateaus reading that doesn't make Brooks fucking angry? So we actually looked at and we started building out a system, and we have some semblance of it still. We're trying to figure out that uses Zorn's methods for Cobra as part of a live reading for 1,000 Plateaus, that forces us to break meaning, that forces us to turn left instead of right, or makes us skip to another section, or forces us to look at a thing through a different lens. Because then a collective reading becomes a very different project. Instead of me telling you how it works, me telling you what it means, it's us discovering what it means, which is what 1,000 Plateaus is about. That's the point. It's in all of it. Oh, good, Fedora. I don't know what your username is. That's you're doing August reading Twilight of the Idols. That guy is becoming more and more popular. He's a threat to my power. He's a threat to my power, that fucking guy. Don't tell him I said that. It's a threat. It's a threat. 4 theses. Okay? First thesis. Every investment of desire, the impulses, every investment is both molar and social. So, your libidinal existence, the impulses of your libido, the force and the powers of in and out, bum, 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 it is primarily and immediately invested socially in the field. Not in the family, not in your direct surroundings, not in mom, not in dad, not in the symbolic structure at all. The unconscious invests in large-scale social formations. That's it. Modes of production, ways that the state has apparatuses that deal with things, apparatus of capture and others, economic systems that you take part in and how you take part. These things, desire invests directly. Libidinal forces invest directly. The family, and I'm a dad. My wife Heather, she's lovely. We got 2 kids. They're wonderful. The family doesn't exist closed off from everything else. The family is already part of the social system. That's it. It's already inscribed on, written on, created and subjugated by that social system. The family is a secondary formation. It's tertiary. It's never the microcosm. First thesis. Really, really fucking important, by the way. Basically obliterates psychoanalysis, but that's the whole thing. But with that, second thesis, okay? There are 2 types of this social investment. Remember, desire invests socially immediately. It does so 2 ways, okay? Preconscious investments of interest and unconscious libidinal investments of desire and impulses. Those are 2 ways that the social world is invested in. The process by which the preconscious interests, preconscious investments of class interests, they're how you sort of see yourself socially. So they're rational, intellectual, calculated, economic, for example. The things that benefit the member of a class, and you determine yourself as a member of that class because you benefit from them. That's it. Right? The preconscious investments of class interest. On the other hand, I just lost like 12 viewers at once. It's weird. Because we don't have a lot of viewers. It's like a third of people just disappeared. On the other hand, we also have our unconscious investments of libido. And this is a desire or group. We might call these the irrational attachments that seem to contradict class interest. That's what we call them. I'm not saying they are that. Colloquially, when we say, wow, why are poor white people voting for a billionaire who said he's going to fuck them? There you go. The perceived preconscious interest of class versus the unconscious libidinal investment of desire. Brooks, who's a middle-class white guy, by all standards, a cis, straight dude. Why is he wanting to upend the entire system? Interests, investments. And by the way, sometimes I am a fascist. It's fine. Like, we're all unique people. I'm more just trying to, again, talk about these things where they're at. The way that workers desire fascism, the downtrodden. There are Palestinians for Israel is a fucking thing. Stephen Miller, who's Jewish, is a Nazi. Like, all right, like this shit's wild. There's a break. Why is there a break? Well, it's because there's two ways of this being investment. There's two ways of this being dealt with, right? Sometimes I'm a fascist. It's true, Rudd. We have these two ways that these things get invested. So, okay, remember, every investment is not personal. It's not pre-personal. It's not familial. Every investment that exists, desire invests only socially. And it does so via interests of class, intellectualized understandings of oneself and where you exist and what you benefit from in society, but also investments of desire unconsciously, more in the structures of things. And with this, the libidinal investments of the social field are primary in relation to everything else, but certainly familial investments. Psychoanalysis is very big on everything being primarily a familial investment, an investment in your relationship with your father or your mother or that structure. The familial investments, though, are actually derived. They're secondary. They're dependent on the entire social field. Your family, how you were raised, how you deal with them on a daily level, does not produce your unconscious. The social field produces both the family and the unconscious. This shift is a big deal, right? So Oedipus, psychoanalysis, and all of these theories around how the family teaches us and sets us up as an origin of things. It doesn't exist. It's an effect of social repression. Social repression of desire creates these conditions and creates and produces these types of subjects. Psychoanalysis fucked up and got it backwards. It reduces everything to the family through this mistake, this universal familialism, and by doing so, takes the unconscious from this extraordinarily massive, infinite, social, historical content machine and reduces it to mommy, daddy, me, the familial triangle. They use the countdown, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, march to death. Very big focus. And then the fourth is, as we go through this, right? This is what we just read. Unconscious social investment also operates along two poles. Okay? Not pre-conscious. Unconscious social investment operates on the paranoid fascist pole or the schizoid revolutionary. So this is how these things come to be. This is how the process of desire invests and then creates the social field that it then has meaning produced by. The process being, to say it one more time, Thesis 1 establishes a social field as the primary object of unconscious investment, the primary place desire finds itself invested. With that, we have two types of investment, interest versus desire, social interest versus impulsive connections. And with this, all of these things mean that the family, the structures, how we understand ourselves are also subordinated to the social. This reverses traditional psychoanalysis. And this unconscious desires investment also has two poles. So, as we're talking about these things, and as we're talking about schizoanalysis, we're about to get to the paragraphs. I'm about to continue reading, but I want to just say this and get through this. Chapter 4 takes us through. First, the destructive task of schizoanalysis is to disintegrate our attachment or the symbolic elements of ego, family, Oedipus, lack, things you're missing, whatever. Cleansing the unconscious of these constructions that exist and were existing socially. With that negative task, because that's deconstructive, it's disintegrative. They use a lot of terms for it, but it's a negative task. We have the positive task that goes with it. And it is to reach desiring production and its machines and understand it via itself, its indices, and through this analyze the social production and distinguishing the two poles within the subject. This is what they're going through and what they're setting up. And this next paragraph basically is a big one. God damn it. That was a big one. But it does mention Klosowski, which will be fun. This next one kind of goes through everything I just talked about and gives a, I think, probably much better version of it. But it talks through all of these things and how they might apply. Is everyone following so far where we're at? Because we're nearing the end of the book. And at this point, if you just joined us, we're going to be starting again. Don't worry. I have to read this book forever. It's my deal with Satan. It's the way it works. So we will get through it. But if you've been following, the hope would be you'd be able to go, oh, I get it. I get some of it. I get that this is the process, and I just went through it. Is all that working for everyone so far? If you are alienated every step of the way, well, the thing is, you're not actually alienated. This is alienation is produced through the interactions of those investments socially and how they then fall back on production. So the alienation isn't really that you are alienated. It's that the experience of alienation is produced through desire and how it is invested socially, falling back on itself and then controlling itself, which produces all of these other things and the images of things and how they get selected. That's the setup that they're sort of talking about. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. All right. Which is the main experience. Yes. And this is, for them, this is written from the standpoint of an analyst-analysand relationship, right? So like, and there's a lot of versions of this, but they're taking aim specifically at dude in office laying on couch going, oh yes, tell me about your father. That's what they're aiming at. But they're talking in general as well about, psychiatric, psychological sort of counseling and all of that, where you have someone, and instead of spending time going, yes, tell me about your father, and aiming at the symbols of the family, what you need to do is help people sort of deconstruct and break down the symbols of things. And as you're doing it, what will happen and what will begin to emerge are the indicators, the indices of actually where desire is invested. And again, it's not invested in a symbol. It's not invested in a thing or a place or even a structure directly, not as a totalized thing. Desire is attracted or repulsed, and the indices of those attractions and repulsions. That's why they keep using basically the language of magnets. The flux of things, right? Magnetic, like this, there's a reason they use these terms. You're able to start understanding things in the same way that if I were to take metal filings and drop them on a magnetic board, it may form a fuzzy beard on a guy of a picture, but that doesn't mean that I have a fuzzy beard. The pieces are just showing, indicating indices. Each of those fragments are an indice of where attraction is happening and the direction it's happening to, but it doesn't mean that it's a beard. I can see how some raised in individualistic social context confuse this for be revolutionary, get schizo, given the analyst relationship. It's, and it's also the language. Like, it's one of the things that the American version, because of how the language is structured, like it's a grammatical shitty thing, to be perfectly frank. A lot of it is focused on the you or I or person or analyst. The French has an edge to it that is, I don't want to say like not individual, but it doesn't play in the same way. It doesn't read in exactly the same way. It's instead very much talking about things as if we were saying, instead of your gut bacteria health, which is what I have to say to you in English, you would instead speak to the gut bacteria health that is in you, which is not the same thing, right? Like one's possessive and private, and the other is kind of just this stuff that happens to be there, and it's spoken differently. The language is fascinating. And again, this is where you start getting into like some of the really great stuff. Daniel Smith's translations of other works and other speeches, the Purdue Project, they've really gone to great pains, and La Poujade does as well, to try to bridge that gap, I think, in a really good way. This translation has been around for so long that it's the standard, but I think it changes just enough to be really, really, really annoying. Things like, just there's a lot of things. I won't go into it. I've already done that too many times. But yeah, it's a little bit different. You like people, not you and your weird relationship with your dad, because exactly, it's a non-personal you. It's again, a lot of romantic languages have that, like a lot of European sort of setups have that. English went really hard on it though. Went really hard into the individual. It's really weird. Fascinating, actually. Like that's the other side, is like when you start talking about even translating this into something like Mandarin, which is just functionally not even close to the same setup. It's a wild thing. I know at LJ we've talked about it. Like it'll be very interesting, but its language is so fascinating that way. We're gonna keep going, because right here we're gonna start getting through, and there is this whole thing is just so much. This is a big one, but this is answering the questions they had at the end there and talking through kind of some of these steps. Now that I've reviewed them, it's kind of important because we're about to sort of go through and elaborate on specifically the problem of how the paranoid investment is necessarily mystified, right? They're going to be talking about the paranoid investment and how it's grounded within this socius, this sort of odd social BWO-like thing that exists beyond what we understand as our conscious interests, and how this sort of functions and how it deals with itself, because it can't sort of exist directly. It has to become universal. It can't be just for me. It has to be a thing that is universal. The way that if I say, hey, mom called, I say that the word mom works. I'm talking about my mom, but the word mom is a universal. If I say, well, mom, that's so fucking universal that destroys any chance of actually caring about any individual person. D&G and Lacan explain through metaphors. I hate you, Rudd. I hate you. D&G don't use metaphors. Lacan uses the fuck out of them. D&G are actually just speaking literally. And it is really weird to say that, given that it sounds like metaphors. They're not using any metaphors. Just to state, because I can go back to the first line. First line of the book. Do you know it? Machines operating. Not metaphors, real machines. Not metonymy. It's not sounds alike, seems alike, structured alike. They are being literal. They're always being literal. They're very careful to be literal in this book. They will say when they're being allegorical, I flatten the meaning for the meme. That's how it works. Metonymy versus homology. Yes, it's a very different beast. Very different beast. And it doesn't seem like it. It is shit that took me a long time to sort of understand. It's and still working through, but it's really interesting shit. We'll get to it. Not go into it now, though, because I need a paragraph to read. That's my job. You people have made it my job. This is a long one. And Klosowski. We have seen that the unconscious paranoiac investment was grounded in the socius itself as a full body without organs, beyond the preconscious aims and interests that it assigns and distributes. The fact remains that such an investment does not endure the light of day. It must always hide under assignable aims or interests presented as the general aims and interests, even though in reality the latter represent only the members of the dominant class or a fraction of this class. How could a formation of sovereignty, a fixed and determinate gregarious aggregate, endure being invested for their brute force, their violence, and their absurdity? They would not survive such an investment. Even the most overt fascism speaks the language of goals, of law, order, and reason. Even the most insane capitalism speaks in the name of an economic rationality. And this is necessarily the case, since it is in the irrationality of the full body that the order of reasons is inextricably fixed, under a code, under an axiomatic that determines it. What is more, the bringing to light of the unconscious reactionary investment, as if devoid of an aim, would be enough to transform it completely, to make it pass to the other pole of the libido, to the schizo-revolutionary pole, since this action could not be accomplished without overthrowing power, without reversing subordination, without returning production itself to desire. For it is only desire that lives from having no aim. Molecular desiring production would regain its liberty to master in its turn the molar aggregate under an overturned form of power or sovereignty. That is why Klosowski, who has taken the theory of the two poles of investment the furthest, but still within the category of an active utopia, is able to write, quote, "Every sovereign formation would thus have to foresee the destined moment of its disintegration. No formation of sovereignty, in order to crystallize, will ever endure this prise de conscience, for as soon as this formation becomes conscious of its imminent disintegration in the individuals who compose it, these same individuals decompose it by way of the circuitous route of science and art. Human beings have many times revolted against this fixity, this capacity, notwithstanding the gregarious impulse in and by science caused this rupture to fail. The day humans are able to behave as intentionless phenomena, for every intention at this level of human being always obeys the laws of its conservation, its continued existence. On that day, a new creature will declare the integrity of existence. Science demonstrates by its very method that the means that it constantly elaborates do no more than reproduce, on the outside, an interplay of forces by themselves without aim or end, whose combinations obtain such and such a result. However, no science can develop outside a constituted social grouping. In order to prevent science from calling social groups back in question, these groups take science back in hand, integrate it into the diverse industrial schema. Its autonomy appears strictly inconceivable. A conspiracy joining together art and science presupposes a rupture of all our institutions and a total upheaval of the means of production. If some conspiracy, according to Nietzsche's wish, were to use science and art in a plot whose ends were no less suspect, industrial society would seem to foil this conspiracy in advance by the kind of mise-en-scene it offers for it, under pain of effectively suffering what this conspiracy reserves for the society, i.e., the breakup of the institutional structures that mask the society into a plurality of experimental spheres, finally revealing the true face of modernity, an ultimate phase that Nietzsche saw as the end result of the evolution of societies. In this perspective, art and science would then emerge as sovereign formations that Nietzsche said constituted the object of his counter-sociology, art and science establishing themselves as dominant powers on the ruins of institutions. Oh my, people talking. Why is there being no metaphor in AO significant? You say it a lot, but I don't get it. Are there particular thinkers who make mislead mileage? Oh, dude, if you're so lucky that you don't understand why I say it and you're like, that's not interesting, don't dig into this. Don't stay out. Stay out. Don't enter. This is you don't want to come into this very terrible place. It's like saying, I don't understand. Does baby shit smell that bad? Let me shove my face in a diaper. Like, just stay away. These people are, everyone on YouTube, and I say everyone, it's just a safe bet. I know there are exceptions. Literally talks about it as though it's metaphorical. The desiring machines are metaphors for people. Like shit, outright they say that these things are metaphors. Other people can back me up. If you haven't experienced this, God, I am envious, Will. I adore you. I adore you. You can, by the way, unmute if you want as well. Because I know you got a mic. You have a reading group, for God's sake. But you don't have to. I won't force you. You don't know YouTube well. Well, yeah. It's a little damage control. It's also a thing we get. I will say actually get a lot people talking about this stuff when they come to the QC. They understand it as metaphorical. That, oh yeah, no, desiring machines like video games. It's like, okay, no, pull back. They're being extremely specific. It's a real philosophical thing. And they're really doing real work here. They use a lot of jargon, so I get why people think that there's a really big edge to this, where it's like, oh, they have a lot of terms that on their face seem fucking stupid. Like, what's a body without organs? Oh, it's a metaphor for not knowing what a body really is made of. No, it's a thing. They're being literal. Like, and yeah, that's the other side. Rudd has it, which is, and not to be like persecutory, but it exists that way. People like using metaphors when they talk about D&G, when they talk about anything, in order to, one, I believe, obfuscate their actual understanding of the book, which is minimal, and to also make it seem to others like they really know their shit. And so we have a lot of people who do that, and they do it in books. There's Justin Murphy, how you doing? There are people who write books who do this and use metaphors explicitly, and it's very tiring. So yeah, it's a little bit of damage control and being specific, but also I think just generally people who aren't really used to what I would say is like rigorous philosophical reading. And at one point I was this. It seems metaphorical until you go, oh wait, no, that's actually not how this works. Does that make sense, Will? See, Guattari, for example, and Guattari's bright as shit. Guattari says it kind of confuses me because D&G use engineering words for their concepts, like machines literally invoke an image of cybernetics and physics. And I would say, yes, they're literally using the concepts of machines from Raymond Rouillé, who invented cybernetics. Like that's his, I shouldn't say invented it, but he's the guy. We have a series of readings on the channel. They're using these terms specifically. And it sounds odd because they're using physics terms in philosophy and they're using this, but they're not doing it in a way that like Bill Nye the Science Guy does. I kind of blame science communicators for a lot of this, where they go, you know, it's like this, blah, 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 blah. And they give some fucking, I can't even like off the top of my head do it, but it's like they give some metaphor. Carl Sagan used to do this a lot. In order to have a universe, in order to bake an apple pie, you must first invent the universe. Sentences that have a larger meaning that are kind of clever, but on their own are just mostly metaphorical and making a statement that seems more profound than it is. These kinds of things, they're not doing. They're being very specific in who they're pulling from, and it's kind of incredible when you get into it. Like the depth that they go and how many like real things they're playing with. And people get pissed, like, oh, I don't think Deleuze is using proper physics terminology. It's like, okay, good. People have done work since and they've built off of it. He's a guy who wrote 60 years ago, but it's, yeah, it's a lot. Oh, Tyson, and I don't mind Hofstadter. So sorry, 2 seconds, Spider, apologies. I don't like Hofstadter.
Sorry. I was just saying, like in the YouTube conversation before. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it a lot that when you were talking about improvisation, you're talking from perspective of being a drummer, and I guess I just appreciate it a lot that you were making a case for the fact that this is not just like random shit. It's just like you put random blocks together and stuff like that. Like there is a stylistic context and lots of other context to take account for in order for it to work.
Yep.
And that's what makes it complicated and interesting and fun, I guess. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'm glad. Well, it's all. The other thing is, and that's a great example. People will go, and I've had people make comments where it's like, "Oh, you're talking about drumming," or I often talk about video games. I talk about Dota a lot, but people are like, "Oh, so it's kind of like a video game." Like, no, it's not like a video game. I'm talking about literal desiring production and how it happens along, like within that space. I'm not making a metaphor that like, oh yeah, no, it's kind of like when someone's doing improvisational music. No. It is when people are doing improvisational music. It is the same thing.
That in the moment when I am like making music with other people, it feels that the stuff that Deleuze is talking about directly relates to the stuff that I am doing, in a sense that maybe the theoretical part of it is for me sometimes hard to connect, but the way that people interact with people, I see this resonance at the very least.
Well, and a lot of the terms they use, like someone in chat on YouTube is saying, they use these terms more intentionally and specifically, and I would say correctly, than what we often see as futurists or people who fancy themselves these commentaries on Twitter or YouTube or other things. Because like cybernetics as a thing, Raymond Rouillère alone, who I just got introduced to. And so again, don't feel bad if you haven't heard of him. I'd heard of him before, but I just really got into him thanks to our readings here. Thanks to the people running that, who I adore. Thank you. You're amazing. But like, there is actually a tradition of philosophical thought within cybernetics. They're using those terms. Simondon, who deeply was done dirty by Deleuze, as in my opinion, for how much he borrows from him without as much credit as he deserves, is explicitly about physics and all the ways he talks about how machines operate. The language Simondon came up with was not actually invented by him either. He's pulling from others. And that tradition of what these things mean, because today we hear, let's see, what would be, coextensive. We hear the term coextensive when it comes to cybernetics or when it comes to machinery, when it comes to code and all of these other things. And we think, they're talking about it kind of like that. It's like, no. They've got this huge tradition of real things that when people are talking about this shit, and it's so literal across the entire thing, it almost fucks with it. Josh is hitting it. In logic of sense, there's a notion of sense that Deleuze develops that is actually not literal or metaphorical, and it's much closer to literal, but he doesn't do the thing where he's playing word games. There's no like odd way of understanding. His goal as he writes, and I believe it's why he uses the terms he does and writes the way he does, is, and I can't use the term grok anymore. Fuck you, Elon. But that's the thing. You're intended to grok it instantly as you go. Make sense of the thing as you make your way through. And it's wild. Guattari asks, Rouillère is not as influential as Simondon. I actually would argue, I could probably make a very good argument that Rouillère is far more influential. But that the terms and the way that Simondon did things bleeds into stuff. I would have a tough time saying that one is more than the other. Like, they're so both built into so much Deleuze does, but I would say so many other thinkers too. They're crazy. Rouillère's like, they're doing the new, god damn it, what is the new reading they just did? They just started One sec, I have it right here. Somewhere. Or I don't.
Shadow something?
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Rier came up with an entire thing. I'll be reading this, and they're going through it, and you will see lines and concepts that are just in fucking science fiction now, that are just everywhere, or little. It's insane where you start seeing these pieces that have very much been just formative across everything, to be perfectly frank. It's stunning how much influence these guys have. It's absolutely absurd. Now, Klosowski is, again, another one of those that people tend not to hear a lot of. But it's a crazy thing.
I know it might sound,
Neo-finalism, thank you.
Quite,
thank you. Go ahead.
I know it might sound quite stupid, but I recently went to a second-hand store, and I just took I think it was Dickens' book, A Bleak House, right?
Yeah.
And I took it and I started reading it, and I was like, it reads so fucking stale, and it's so fucking boring. And then I checked the soft cover of the fucking thing, and it was one of these, like, I guess it's a thing. I didn't know that it was even a thing, like retold as kind of things.
Yep.
So it's like rewritten story for a language level kind of thing. Like and I guess my point is just like, if I wouldn't looked at it, I would have read the whole fucking thing, and I wouldn't even know. And I would have thought that like Charles Dickens was some kind of a fucking retard, you know. Like,
pardon the language. Pardon the language.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
I say it all the time, and I'm working my way out of it. But yes,
it's
very. If you want something great, it's one of those things that I've always enjoyed finding fiction through these guys. Klosowski actually has fiction works, as much as he is. I mean, he's not necessarily known.
Klosowski has fiction works.
Yes.
Wow.
So if I can recommend, it's that. And I would recommend also, if you can find, everyone knows Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, but if you can find Carroll's other works, they're genuinely enjoyable to read. And there is specifically, I'll just say in general, look through some of his later works, some of his bigger stuff that seems like it's not as absurd. It is far more absurd and a lot more brilliant.
Okay.
And also, My Neighbor
like
Sod from Klosowski, even though it's not fiction, so fucking good. God damn. Yeah, well, we have our Klosowski readings on Thursday at noon, if anyone wants to join.
I joined some at the start of the thing, and already, because like I've joined before the Twilight of the Idols, and I read it myself, and I had some like experience with Nietzsche before. I'm sorry, I'm fucking up a reading.
No, you're not fucking, dude. Literally, no one cares. Just so you know, you're good. Okay, literally, no one cares. You're fine. I'm popping up the Baphomet. If you haven't read it, I recommend the Baphomet, which I just copied into the chat here. It's a very enjoyable. It's a very unique read. Okay.
I'm for whatever. Like I've been blessed by this community and Sunday's community as well, to just like be able to read stuff, being from another part of the world, and still, you know, being part of this community. It's been nice.
Well, we're glad to have you, and we're really happy.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna fuck off.
Awesome. What the fuck? Okay. I lost where we were. I didn't lose where we were. We are going through bit by bit. We're about to start and go through this entire massive paragraph. It's a lot, actually. So we'll just start and we'll just go. Off we go. Okay. To say, we have seen that the unconscious paranoiac investment was grounded in the socius itself as a full body without organs, beyond the preconscious aims and interests that it assigns and distributes. I need to turn notifications off. Okay. Paranoid investments, paranoid unconscious investments. Okay. As they say, unconscious paranoiac investment. These investments actually find their foundation, their grounding in the socius as it functions as a BWO. It is not a BWO. It's not a BWO. It's not a BWO. But it functions as a full BWO, full body without organs. This means it functions as a undifferentiated surface that appropriates production. Okay? The investment itself, though, is operating at a deeper level than this conscious class interest, this rational goal, the rationalizations, intellectualizations of things. Those are secondary distributions. Those secondary distributions are assigned by this socius as recording surface to legitimize itself. Okay? You have to remember, again, it's not a BWO, but the socius appropriates. It is a recording surface. It is a full BWO. They're very specific about this wording. It's particular. The world doesn't have a BWO. The socius, as full body without organs, as the appropriating structure, does this. Okay? I know, it's a lot. The investment is not a BWO. Okay. So the investment happens in the social space. The unconscious paranoiac investment is grounded in the social space. But it's grounded specifically in the socius, that larger ruling structure, the despotic capital or the earth, as full BWO. It, as full BWO, is where it's invested. The recording surface that writes, that creates in quotes, that is a self-generated sort of, what is the phrase I'm looking for? Quasi-cause. A quasi-cause. The clause arrangement is very confusing in English. You're not fucking alone. In French, it's corplan sans organe. If you were to do a direct translation, like a lot, which I think works better, it's the investment would be grounded in the socius itself, as a BWO as recording surface. In a BWO as like a full BWO as recording surface. Corplan sans organe. It's the complete body. The plain, the full body. Not the BWO. BWO is itself a function within desire and production. This is the recording surface of capital. The recording surface of the social world. This is where the investment is grounded, not where it's invested. It's grounded. Beyond preconscious aims and interests it assigns and distributes. Okay? It's founded in the social field, not in ideas, not in interests, not in you, not in me. It's not how it's set up. So as such, this recording surface, this socius as full BWO, determines what counts through basically the exclusive disjunction as legitimate interests. It distributes identities. It distributes roles. It records things. the grooves of the record that are playing as we are born, the grooves of the social world that are being formed as it repeats itself over and over, we find ourselves falling into it, not being pushed, just we find ourselves falling into it, finding our interest easier to be in that groove. And that groove, as it's working and as it's separating, is able to distribute roles. It's able to distribute identities. It's able to play in this. I know, Quat made the joke, but this is Bataille's notion of expenditure here. The socius is this appropriating surface. Do you know how much money how much food humanity produced last year? Enough. Think about that for a second. That's a real fucking thing. Humanity produced enough food, and then some, for everyone. The global poverty rate's like 20-some%. We produced enough. Why did it go where it went? What did you understand that as? How do these things work at a social level? How do we understand what things are valued where? How is expenditure calculated? That enough is a purely mathematical thing we think of after the fact, but that's not how it was going as it went. It had to be recorded. It had to be appropriated. It had to be taken in as this larger scale excess. The full BWO, the socius, does that. It's different than the BWO. Different thing. It's a different thing. To continue, because I think it works to continue that. It makes more sense the socius recording surface would have gotten the opposite from the translation. Yes. One of the many problems with the translation. And again, this is why I don't it's frustrating, but I get why people come away and go, oh, the socius is just another BWO. Nick Land, explicitly, that is his entire philosophy hinges on this mistranslation. I'm not joking when I say that. Everything he believes that capital, just as we have a BWO, just as a BWO exists for a subject as part of this processing thing that sorts and does all this and ultimately creates a subject, as such, the social world having a BWO creates its own. Capitalism is going to be producing a larger scale subject. He sees this as AI, and these little bits of things are the social desiring machines for that larger entity. It's really built off of a mistranslation. Again, also math. I'm not going to explain Nick Land. He sucks. But there's a difference here. And it's one of the big things. It's one of the harder things to sort of talk about, to be frank. One sec. Don't explain him. So, body without organs is the surface on which recording and collecting and these things happen to sort of exist sort of in time. Okay? Desiring production works, and it doesn't work as like a now, staccato pulses. Impulses are going in and off and layering on each other, and the forces of things are in time and temporality. They're now, but they're also coming in, and you're getting sensations from moments ago, and you're also beginning to produce the sensations you'll be having in a moment. That's now happening as you're existing in the now. These things are coming about. This experience doesn't exist nowhere. You're not a staccato lack of continuity. Continuity is something we're able to experience because you understood my sentence I just said, which means you're able to actually take in all of the sounds I've made, and the continuity of the sentence and meaning of the sentence somehow is able to produce the sensations you're taking in as its meaning right now. Magic. Actually, pretty much magic. It's pretty cool. But that process is because continuity, as these sensations are recorded, as you're experiencing the world, there's a consistency that is built. Patterns and places this happens. The BWO is the surface on which that happens. It isn't actually the recordings. It isn't actually the stuff. It's the surface on which. The reason they do this is because it's the term comes from a poet, Artaud, who talked about the body without organs. What am I? The organs are these gross things that are controlling and pulsating. What is the thing that I am beyond them? Because I clearly exist beyond that. Daniel Smith, if you search in here and elsewhere, has a phenomenal paper on explaining why the BWO exists and what it is. That's the basic version. But here's the thing. The social field seems like it has sort of this thing, right? It has this weird recording surface. So then, wouldn't it be that? No. To quote, the socius is not a projection of the corps sans organe, the body without organs. And by body, they mean corpse, the corpse, the totality, without the productive organs. But rather, the corpse sans organes is the limit of the socius. The limit of the socius. It's not the socius. It's explicitly not. The socius, the earth, the body of the despot, capital money, these are clothed full bodies. Like the body without organs, a naked full body. But this one is at the limit, the end, not at the origin. The phrasing they use is weird, where they talk about the full clothed or the naked. They're being very specific, though, in this. And again, it's not metaphorical, it's the functionality of these things. When it's clothed, the socius as a clothed full body, it is in primitive societies or despotic societies, it is a coded socius, signifying, axiomatized. It has organs, it has organization, it has structure, it's territorialized or being re-territorialized as it goes, it's visible, representational, organized, all of those things. A clothed full body. But a naked full body, which is the BWO, this is the difference, is decoded, deterritorialized, asignifying, has no organs, is not organized. It is pure, intensive matter. Matter, yes. Material, matter. Matter. It's materialist. It's materialist. This is not idealized. It is essentially invisible, non-representational, undifferentiated, naked, clothed. Right? We can talk about the origin and the limit. The socius is the origin of social organization. Social organization doesn't begin with you. You don't fucking build society outwards from one dude. Like your body without organs isn't like, oh, yes, you're British. Let's figure out who's king. That's not how it works. You don't end up in that place. It starts out there. Social organization starts out there. It is the origin. This is the clothed full body without organs. It is natural. Marx talks about this when he talks about capital. It is a divine origin. Right? Or divine presupposition. I'm glad I've answered it. It seems to be, appears to be, the origin from which things emanate or emerge or are built. Right? It seems to be the origin of things. And it is actually the starting point of social production. So we'll get through that, but it's the thing. The BWO, that's the limit. That's it. BWOs, that's it. It is the full tangent of deterritorialization. There's nothing beyond deterritorialization. That's the end. You're done. There's not like a super deterritorialization where it's like you get deterritorialized and then you drop acid. Like you're there. You're doing it. And as such, the BWO is almost this residue of deterritorialized elements in the deterritorialized socius. Because it's produced in us as the socius falls back, on production. Right? It's where things vanish, not where things are produced. BWO versus socius. Socius, clothed full body, the origin of social elements and repression, and the quasi-cause of everything, the way that money's what gives us jobs. Eat shit. Like that's That's the bullshit. That's the it's what gives us jobs as billionaires and all that. No, that thing. That's it. The BWO is kind of actually the end of things. It's actually the edge. It is deterritorialization itself. And again, these things don't exist separately. This isn't like, oh yes, I'm going to dissect and we'll pull the BWO. If we don't have desiring production, we don't have a socialist. We don't have social. We don't have things like these things come together. It's all at once. It's all desiring production. That's the point that they really hammer home over and over and over. And we can talk about it as being repressive versus productive. How about that one? So the socius is anti-production. Okay? Anti-production. The socius is anti-production. It blocks the flux. It appropriates the surplus for itself, or seems to, might be a better phrasing of it. Again, as this recording surface, it claims to be the origin of production. Marx's core critique. Capital seems to be why we have industry, right? Right? That is, capital is what made us this. The king is the reason that we all have food on our plate. God or earth, we must give thanks. That's shit. That's because the socius falls back on production. The socius captures production for itself after the fact. If I'm like digging and doing stuff, falls back on. I was digging and doing stuff because I needed to dig and do stuff, but now I understand the reason I was digging and doing stuff is because Mother Earth wanted me to. It's because that man paid me $10. It's because blah, blah, blah. I had captures. Production seems to emanate from the socius. Right? BWO though? BWO is actual production. It's actual production. And it's a good kind of production. The BWO liberates desire. This is the good thing of capitalism, and I'm just going to probably say it stupidly. The good thing of capitalism is it revealed this. It's not like the BWO has never been there, it didn't exist, but the setup of how the BWO functions and these forces come together and how it's set up and how it's built and where it's at, this actually liberates desire and production. Desire and production commonly is run by instinct. Humans are really weird, and a lot of other things. Well, we can have that conversation. I'm not having that debate. But like my dog doesn't have a BWO. It doesn't have a concept of BWO. It doesn't have consistency. It has some level of that, but it's extreme. There isn't a like self there. There isn't an awareness in that way. That's not how dogs work. They've done studies. Selfhood is a really weird thing. This is because desiring production is mostly instinctual, connecting, what my body does, all that. But distraction, which seems unproductive, is like super amazing. It slides in between desiring machines and breaks those connections. Slides in and allows desiring machines to connect in different ways. Otherwise, they would just stay connecting like that. Until it couldn't, until it was unsatisfying. But now we have, oh, this is satisfying. What's that? Kind of thing going on. Right? So we have the ability for desiring machines to be liberated. This recording surface, not the recordings, recording surface is where desire inscribes directly. Desire inscribes in the BWO, not the socius. If you remember, I was talking about how desire ends up in the curves of what's recorded there. Desire's actually recording in the BWO. It's actually recording. It's actually the record needle there, not the produced thing that desire's caught in. The BWO is where the flux freely circulates. So do multiple individual personas or subjects, where subjects are decoded, determined, produced, wandering the BWO, consuming desire, consuming intensities. Production here is imminent. So desire is a needle, BWO is a vinyl disc. Desire is the energy that makes the needle need to be, like, forms the needle and also inscribes. The BWO isn't the vinyl disc. The BWO is the surface on which the vinyl disc is produced. it's hard to talk about, but this is why I use the example of Dota and metas, because we can talk about how these things emerge. And again, the difference between a full body and a naked body without organs. In a video game, no one builds a video game. Well, sometimes Dota guys, Ice Frog is the guy who developed Dota originally. He didn't build it so that way you'd play specific characters in specific ways with specific items. That wasn't how it was designed. Instead, what he did is he built a bunch of characters, a bunch of items, and a single map. And because of how people play Dota, and they started playing, and after a while they started to see, oh, this character does really well doing these things because of how their abilities work or how they move or whatever. Oh, these items work with that character really well. People started to discover the meta that happens within that game. That happens on the surface of recording. The recording's there, but it's happening on a surface that's always there. Always there. The surface doesn't really exist. It's not a visible thing. But somehow, everything we do has a fucking meta. There's a meta for Excel, the fucking spreadsheet program. There's a meta for Word. You can get good at it. You can learn all the ins and outs and the way you're supposed to use it. And that changes over time and based on use and how everyone else is doing it. And suddenly, actually, that becomes the clothed full body, where you go and you come to Dota 20 years into it, not in the beginning, where it was emergently building out and it was the space of possibility and it eventually hardened. Now you come to it and you understand, no, Dota's played by these characters as supports, these characters as this item is the build I have, this is a setup. That is a full closed setup for the BWO, where you have that thing. No, this is what Dota is. Don't you understand how to play this game? That's the fully closed. No one understands how to play this game. That's insane. My favorite version of this is when I was in Overwatch's Friends and Family, because I have buddies who work at Blizzard. I was in the Friends and Family for that. And it was 4 days into the Friends and Family cohort testing. And there was a lot of people. It was like 10,000, I think. And someone yelled at me that I didn't know how to play Overwatch. The game existed in the world for 4 days, as far as like any of these people knew. That's someone who is, by the way, a subjugated human being deeply. But that thing is the problem. Are you taking the meta as the thing that determines how you play? Or is it you are allowing emergence and experiencing the building of the meta as you go and understanding their resources? This is, like I said, not a metaphor. This is the actual production of these things as they go, as I understand it. Say the same thing about improv. Say the same thing about playing jazz music or classical, cooking in a kitchen, being you or not being you, sitting here listening to whatever, hearing me on YouTube, going to a protest, whatever the fuck it is that you are doing. Are you pulling from the way things understand socially? Oh, look, don't you understand what an anarchist is? Don't you understand what real protest? Don't you understand the true problems of the world? Shit like this that people have been screaming at me, and they will scream at you, and you've probably screamed at people, or I have too. That thing, clothed full body. Clothed full body without organs. When we emergently engage, we still have a recording surface. It's still going to be produced. The awareness of that, the awareness of what that means and how it goes, shifts that and changes things. But this is the difference between the two. It's about again, not projection, but considering these things as residue. Projection is the very traditional psychoanalytic way, right? The very, very the old way that they would talk about this sort of setup. When we talk about it instead, we should talk about the BWO as the naked BWO, the BWO itself, as this sort of limiting point, right? Where, and we'll see, or I don't know if we've already seen the diagrams, where the pendulum swings towards pure process, where the limit of doing the thing hits. And again, it's an oscillation. Klosowski, Nietzsche and Vicious Circle, I think, explains this infinitely better. But it's very much the same thing, is you can't ever be white as a white person. You can't ever be a Republican as a Republican. You can't ever be a pizza chef. These these are categories, pure representations. They are you are one. You take it. And as you approach that point, you kind of can't help but like actually hit that limit of what it means or what it can enforce or what it's set up. The socius is the pivot point, the center of it as a thing, as the pendulum swings. But the BWO is the limiting point where the pendulum swings back to pure process because there's no more forward movement as a thing. Okay? Is this following everyone generally? It's a lot. It's a lot. But again, Nick Land's entire thing is that the socius is a BWO. And so as such, we socially have blah, blah, blah. But he's fucking out of he just didn't read the book fully, even for what it is. But again, it's from a lot of translation. The socius is not a BWO. Not in that sense. It's the full clothed body without organs, because it is organized. It's organized. It's determinate. It's coded. It's territorialized. It is a recording surface that captures production. The BWO, very differently, not visible, decoded, deterritorialized limits towards which the socius will tend through its own process of dissolution. It's not an origin. It's a vanishing point, as they call it. As in Alfred North Whitehead process? No. Maybe I'm not getting into that. God damn it, Shakespeare. All right. Now to the next sentence. Fuck my life. What the fuck, first? That's a sentence. That's the first sentence. Motherfucker. Okay. This fucking book. To continue, the fact remains that such an investment does not endure the light of day and must always hide under assignable aims or interests presented as the general aims and interests, even though in reality the latter represent only the members of the dominant class or a fraction of this class. Some minor changes from the French. The fact remains such an investment does not endure the light of day is not how I would translate that myself. I would say it doesn't tolerate the light of day. Enduring means that it can appear in it and just maybe vanishes after a while. It's a very odd choice. Enduring is like, but no, we're talking about like can't tolerate it. It cannot be made visible. This investment cannot be brought to light, cannot be overturned, found, brought, any of this. The paranoid investment as it exists, which is what this paragraph is really about, this unconscious paranoid investment, cannot be consciously, that's like the end of the sentence. It can't exist consciously. It can't exist openly. It requires an almost ideological style cover of stuff. It requires images. It requires other things that allow the lie. This investment directly in power. This is why you hear Trump people who absolutely believe they are anti-authoritarian. Because they have to. You can't. Investment in power as such does not exist nakedly. Yeah, it can't. It doesn't exist nakedly. It has to disguise itself as a universal interest. So, for example, someone who's a Trumper would go, look, I'm not here for unbridled fascist power. I care about making sure that my children are safe. It's a rational interest. It's a rational universal interest. I love these because what you always do, you should immediately go, but would it make sense for anyone to ever want danger for my children? No, because that's fucking stupid. That's fucking stupid. And only an idiot would say this, that's even possible. Like Republicans talking about how we want kids to die. Well, they're protecting child rapists. That's what they do. They fuck kids. So for us, we need to realize, and this is true within ourselves, investment in power is never made conscious. That's not how it works. It's disguised, covered up by images, And these images are that of these universal interests. Protecting our children, economic security or efficacy, right? I care about America. Like, utterly meaningless universal statements. Not good universal statements like every human on earth deserves the right to self-determination and we should support everyone having lodging. Then those are specific universal statements. We're talking about like the useless ones. I just don't want people being murdered. Wow. Because I got to tell you, the pro-murder party, which is what they're starting to call Democrats, because that's how far this investment has to be covered. They're nakedly for power. They will not say that. Not out of lies. You can't consciously do that. It's not how it works. These universal goals, as any good theorist or leftist or activist will tell you, always serve the ruling class or a faction within the ruling class, but the investment has to be mystified. And again, this fucks us because it's a rational interest. I believe in protecting kids. I mean, do you not? Like, of course, we believe in these things. I think it's horrifying that Grok grooms children so that way they can basically be pre-groomed so that way when Trump and his sycophants go troll online, they can find some kids to fuck. And Elon built that expressly to help him find children to have sex with. So that thing is horrifying. I believe children shouldn't be given access to that. I believe in saving the children. But, that, as I'm being serious, but we all know the moment I start down that road, that universal rational interest, it serves the Christian far right, the fascist dictators, it serves Elon Musk and the other assholes like him, despite having a really fucking good point. Doesn't matter. You get fucked. Yes, Queen of Swords puts it best. We have to tolerate the child molesting skinwalkers because they're protecting my children. So yeah, this is the thing that's happening here. They're talking about, this is when we talk about ideology, and when Marx talked about it and others talk about it, they're talking about how these images and what they produce and how they're set up with. D&G don't have an ideology. That ideology is, to a lot of people, Lacan and Zizek and others, a veil of lies that is pulled down over the truth. It's not. It's not that. People who directly invest in power necessarily falls back on production and produces images that give them this meaning that they can use. This is not a lie. This is not a dishonest thing. Honesty and all of that shit. It's out the door. Fucking forget about it. That's not the important thing that matters here at all. These things cannot be openly acknowledged because you can't. It requires consciousness to do so. But the consciousness has to be produced by the images that come after the investment. If you invest in power directly, you don't do so as a like, oh yes, let me check my, oh yes, no, power directly. The words don't even matter. The investment is in the impulse, the thrust, the structure, over and over and over and over, the way in that pattern operates. And that pattern in turn produces, in that process, produces meaning that falls back on with those images that then comes. Consciousness doesn't have a chance to even recognize itself. You, every single person who's here is invested in power in some capacity. I don't give a fuck who you are. It does not matter at all. You don't even, if you think you're not, you have a lot of soul searching to do to understand. We are all invested in some capacity in power. And none of us can see it directly because we can't consciously be aware of it because the consciousness that's produced by the process comes so far down the line, how would we ever recognize it? That's the way it works. That's the setup. And this is what they say. How could a formation of sovereignty, a fixed, determinate gregarious aggregate, endure being invested for their brute force, their violence, their absurdity? They're asking this weird thing. There's no power structure, no organized state or social formation that could maintain itself if people consciously recognized they were investing in pure violence, pure irrationality, or arbitrariness and nutcase bullshit. The system requires rationalization to survive. And it just so happens, oh hey, capitalism falls back on itself, produces subjects that then have meaning, that then can't recognize where that power comes from. Hey, that's how that fucking works. This is the process. This is how men, also women, also non-binaries, also trans people, also everyone, all you fucking people, how you come to desire your own repression in one way or another. Because that desire, that direct desire, they say, that desire would not survive such an investment. Society would not survive a direct investment like that was consciously done. That power structures would collapse if the pure violence and that irrational foundation were openly acknowledged. This is not a both sidesing thing I'm about to do, because I do very much believe this is very much the fascist Republican take, but hey, we're all in a liberal world, and I don't care how left you are, we all are affected by it and produced by it. All of us are invested in it in some capacity. We all do this, we all invent this. This setup means that if you watch tankies, for example, tankies jerk off to like guillotine videos. Like they adore it. There are people who do the same with ISIS beheading videos. Like people are fucking nuts on a lot of sides of this, but even they would not say that they're directly in it for the violence. They're not invested in the violence. They're invested in fighting power. They're invested in anti-capitalism. They're invested in Hassan's dog. Whatever the fuck is happening this week. They'll cover it up because the investment in violence, which we have, which desire invest directly, can't be avowed. Not because it's disavowed, but because the very structure of desire doesn't have symbols or understanding of what it's investing in until it's consciousness. And by then, you're fucked. Even the most overt fascism, most overt, go find your craziest Stormfront Nazis. Go do that. The most overt fascism speaks the language of goals, of law, order, and reason. Even Nazism, the most explicit, outwardly violent, outwardly authoritarianism, outwardly irrational system that exists in politics. Go read the books from Hitler, go read modern shit at all. Still has to and must present itself as rational discourse. Our goals are the workers, the national workers. We care about our workers here. We care about the legal order of things and how the laws really, really matter. I watch The Necessary Conversation. Great podcast. Two older children of two boomer morons who voted for Trump. My brother and I very much empathize with this. They do weekly things where they talk about stuff. And the dad said that we've got to get rid of democracy. He said this. And everyone's like, what the fuck? And he started to explain it. He's getting rid of democracy so we can go back to being a republic. What does that mean? Well, it's because a democracy is pure mob rule. A republic has rules. So even in his, geriatric, tumor-ridden or pocket-ridden mind, he still is rationalizing. He still is coming back to, oh no, we've got to get rid of the power of the people, democracy, in order to give the people power. And he's found a way to do it because he is produced after the investment in power is made. You have to present yourself this. Nazi Germany did this. They spoke of law and order. They spoke of racial science and truth and economic recovery and all these things that are, flatly, completely universal and rational. Like, does anyone not want to live in the world that Nazi Germany talked about, where we'd have, everyone be happy, we'd have jobs for everyone, there'd be money. Also, we're doing these other things, but that's only so we can do these wonderful things. Like, this is the violence is what the investment is in, but the rest comes around and finds it. The goals, the laws, reason, order, all these things. That comes around. This is how this works. Yeah, please.
what exactly do we mean by violence in this particular context?
Oh, as there are 1,000 people missing from Alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of just wondering if there's a way to, because when you say that everybody has this investment in it, is there a way that we can?
Have you seen John Wick?
Yeah.
Did you kind of like it?
Oh yeah.
There you go. Like that's my joke with John Wick is it exists as a film that shows how absolutely we are invested in violence itself to the point where we needed the littlest excuse that's ever existed for mass murder in the history of the world. And that's a dog was killed. So therefore, 1,000 people need to die violently and brutally. And people have made this criticism. I'm not unique in saying this, but I think the thing not to look at is, it shows how violent we are. No, we're invested. And that investment is in violence, is in power, is in, these things we're attracted to. And as we do that, and as the experience comes back and falls back on itself, we find the reasons for it, and we then rationally say them out. It's a part of the process of us investing socially. It is this system that is doing this. This is how it works.
That makes sense, and I would agree that it's the same thing in I'm somebody who's generally very much against violence, but I know that when I play D&D, for example, we specifically choose systems, or any TTRPG, right? We specifically choose systems that are built around violence, where combat's going to be a feature of the game. You wouldn't have to do this; you could absolutely play other games. We do it anyways, right? And so that makes perfect sense to me. But
have you ever seen the movie Pig?
I don't think I have. No.
Pig is a Nick Cage. It's an anti-John Wick. There's no other way to, the director is explicit about it. It's one of my favorite films of all time because it is about a guy who has the same excuse as John Wick. And actually, I would say they even build up a really more emotional version of it. And yet visits no violence on anyone else, outwardly, in any way, very much focuses on his own violence towards himself or other people hurting him, trying to find his way through the world. It's phenomenal. And
definitely watch that, yeah.
It has a scene in it that I think is somehow, without any violence, the most violent retribution I've ever seen on somebody. And it's a dinner scene. If you see it, once you see it, you'll know. I've never seen anything like it in my life that emotionally just hit me like a fucking ton of bricks. But again, how it works and how the story comes about and all this, these are movies, they're examples. It's the same process. When people see ICE grabbing people who are off the streets, they see the violence, they're invested in that violence. We're not invested in that. I'm not invested in that violence. I find it horrifying. I'm also not super invested in violence against a lot of things, to be very frank. I don't like it, and I find it generally distasteful. I'm not there. Doesn't do it for me. So I don't go through the process of having that investment turn back on itself and then find justifications through all of it. But other people have to. When you're directly invested in something that is violent, there's no goal there. You're invested in the violence. Violence is an end in itself. It's a thing that happens. It isn't violence towards something. We're not talking about, I saw the revolutionary fervor as they dragged out this, Mussolini and hung him upside down and his wife. So I painted it and sent it to his daughter, which was really funny. She's a horrible fascist too. Go Jim Carrey. But that thing doesn't have a goal. I've just told a story. The investment in violence is so clear to these people. You can see it on X, you can see it on old internet forums, and you can see it in person in bars and other things where they go, oh, look at that hit. Yeah, get him. Or they see someone get tackled or someone get shot and killed. And they're like, yeah, that's what that person gets who broke the law. Their investment is in the violence. And then the process occurs that allows them to put words to it. And the words are selected through that process and those investments. Okay.
That makes sense. What I sort of mean to get at with this is, or with my question is, could we picture what it would look like for there to be a working society where we would not be able to say this about them, that they're invested in violence? And then also regarding definitions of violence, I think it's a very interesting topic in general that could, balloon way out. But do we include structural violence in the sense of people who are not actively being harmed, but tend to be like starving because of things.
Well, this is Zizek's book on violence specifically, I think, does a phenomenal job of drawing out how the most violent things we can actually do are nothing. And his reasons for that and how he begins to describe what violence is, I think goes beyond this. Because again, that all is very much violence with a purpose. And the purpose for Zizek is what makes it violent. So if I do nothing, like it's because I trip, I break my legs, so I don't go to vote. Or I go, I'm not voting, and you just decide not to and go about my day. Those are two very different acts for Zizek. The intention is very much built into it because he has a very different understanding of this sort of ontological system. For D&G, the violence itself, like the actual act, something being violent, that has no goal, that has no larger anything, is what they're speaking of. And when we're talking about that, it's not the same thing as a doing nothing or even Pig's dinner scene, where I would say, it's eating dinner and talking about memories. That's not violent at all. The investment in a dinner, I like a good dinner. I'm invested in that dinner for that reason. I like a good dinner. I'm a little bit of a nerd with wine and like food, and the scene is amazing. The food is amazing. Memories, stories, all that. It's not the same thing. I'm not invested in violence there. But I would argue that intellectually, I can tell you it's one of the most violent goddamn things I've ever seen. And it's insane. It's like mind-blowing. I can't say more, but it's that thing. And Quat, actually, yes, the pen can be more violent than the sword, but not in the way they're talking about it. They don't want us to talk about things in terms of the larger symbolic structure or where something fits in or how it works when we're talking about violence. Desire doesn't understand goals. It doesn't understand full bodies. Desire, for nobody in the Republican Party, is Trump. That's not what they're doing. Their desire is not ballroom. Their desire is not red hats. Their desire is not kill Mexicans. Their investment is in violence. Their investment is in X, Y, and Z. And it's these very specific things that sort of are structural and ends in themselves. That investment falls back on itself socially to give itself meaning and to be the cause of meaning. So everyone can go, see, I'm actually interested in justice. That's why I want these immigrants gone. No. Because again, intellectually, we can have the larger conversation. We can. It's great. But the investment needs to be the thing we see. We need to understand that the investment is first in violence, first in the structure, first in the power, first in these things, and that the rhetoric of discourse is there to cover it. The rhetoric of these things give it goals, law, and order, and reason that work. And again, the reason I mentioned those goals, law, order, reason, these are the philosophical categories of the teleological, the legal, the stable, and the rational. These are the things that ideology is made of for Marx and for others. So when we talk about these things, those are the cover elements, but they're not put in there before the power. They're not like, okay, I'm going to totally be for these fucking awful videos, but I first have to figure out, no, that's the process falls back on and produces constantly. That's the setup. It's ever going. It's ever setting up. And it's the example they give to try to continue in the paragraph because it's important is capitalism. Even the most insane capitalism speaks in the name of economic rationality. Argentina, which is like the whack job country of the world as far as I'm concerned right now, is apparently, as the meme says, Atlas is shrugging, but also, can you spare $20? Is taking in billions of dollars of outside investment in order to stay stable. And it's doing this in the name of rational Mises bullshit Austrian economics and for everybody, which is crazy. But that's what's happening. Their language they're using, they're not being blunt about it. They're not like, hey, we're fucked up over here. And what's funny is you can see where people's investments are by how they cover. Trump doesn't give a fuck about the economic situation in Argentina. He doesn't. Why is he putting money there? Because his investment is in these larger structures that he's got. Did anyone see how he talked about it? He talked about it and this reporter, he went, now, young lady, which is like so fucking weird. Now, young lady, They're fighting for their lives. They're dying in the gutters. They're dying there. They're dying. And it's the thing he's doing in no way is going to like, does he think that for the $40 billion the U.S. has given is being spent in medicine? Or is it being spent to pay out debts the government has to business entities? Of course. Of course, we're not stupid. We can look at it. We can see it. It's plain. It's very easy. But our investment in these things, the setup for these things. Yes. What's up, bud? I have a delivery. One moment. I have a delivery, everyone. That's a thing for Brooks Brown. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Oh, this is not for me. This is a thing I got for you. Oh. Do you want to come say hi, Dex? Come yell hi.
Hi.
There we go. One moment, everyone. I thought you would like this. Go upstairs and give it a read. Ask Mom to open it for you.
What's this?
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
It's a curiosity book. Go upstairs, open it up. Mom will show you. Kurzgesagt, I don't care. I don't give a fuck. Don't talk to me if you don't like them. Did a book for little kids, curiosity book, where it gives them tasks and they have to go do experiments and explore. It's phenomenal. So that's a Dex thing. So the setup is first the investment and then that. Even capitalism in the most insane, obviously fucking bullshit ways that we exist now, where we're giving the largest social media platform worth billions, making a profit, to local power brokers like the Ellisons, just because we want power in certain ways. Well, are we invested in the economy? No. We're rational, though. We're rational. Yeah, TGC, they're okay. They're okay. They're for kids. They're great for kids. Fucking, I'm gonna be an adult. Read better things. So they say, and this is necessarily the case, since it is in the irrationality of the full body that the order of reasons is inextricably fixed under a code, under an axiomatic that determines it. This inextricably in itself fixity that happens as part of this. The setup that's happening is not only structurally necessary because it's not contingent. It's not contingent on activity. It's structurally necessary. But it is because rational discourse, the codes of the world, the way we talk, the economic axioms of Argentina not being a fucking hellscape, they're always already embedded in and determined by the socius. Rationality, if you ever say, oh, I'm being rational, rationality is normative. Rationality is the superstructure of a rational investment. The order of reasons, the phrasing these, order of reasons isn't grounding power. Power grounds the order of reasons. So the investment in that, okay, are we following? Good. To continue. That's fantastic. My daughter likes it too. What is more? Here we're on the what is more here. What is more, the bringing to light of the unconscious reactionary investment. I know this is a long one. Trust me, I wanted to finish this fucking 40 minutes ago. What is more, the bringing to light of the unconscious reactionary investment as if devoid of an aim would be enough to transform it completely, to make it pass to the other pole of libido, i.e., to the schizo-revolutionary pole, since this action could not be accomplished without overthrowing power, without reversing subordination, without returning production itself to desire. For it is only desire that lives from having no aim. Movie trope that is, I think, a phenomenal example of this. I'm going to go with Last Action Hero, but it's very, very common. You have like the mastermind bad guy who somehow controls everything. the mob boss in Last Action Hero. And then you have the brilliant but sociopathic guy who doesn't give a fuck about money or anything who works underneath him. Inevitably, that guy betrays or is killed by the leader. That setup, right? The reason is because that guy doesn't give a fuck about, he's able to be controlled because of some level of investments, but he doesn't have the same goals. Maybe he has none at all. And the eventual point of that is to basically do the opposite because it doesn't have goals. Someone who doesn't actually experience the goals of power, even if they're invested in it, eventually breaks the other way. These things eventually break the other way. They shift. It changes. The paranoiac investments, if they are exposed as naked irrationality, naked violence, as things, as this happens, when they're shown to be this, not for a larger purpose, necessarily it would transform them into a revolutionary investment. Because goals are the thing socially made that we share, that fascize, right? If we expose the aimlessness of this investment, it only happens through a revolutionary break. Inverting subordination, overthrowing power. These are the only ways that this thing gets revealed. And this releases desiring production from servitude to whatever the fuck. Like whatever the fuck. Only desire itself, the impulses, have no aim. Desire, the impulses, produce for the sake of production, not for some external end, and as such, can invert these things. Okay? This is the rest of my day. Jesus Christ. So they go on to say, this last little bit here, and then we'll get to Klosowski. Molecular desiring production would regain its liberty to master, in its turn, the molar aggregate under an overturned form of power of sovereignty. So we're talking about after this revolution, the thing we just talked about. The schizoid pole, right, would reclaim its freedom to dominate molar social formations, and it would do so. This domination itself would operate in like an inverted power structure, where the molecular uses the molar as material for experimentation rather than being captured, controlled, or conditioned by it. This is sovereignty in a fucked up way, where the sovereignty is actually subordinated to desire rather than subordinating desire to power. Like that's that. And we get into Klosowski. And here's the thing with this. This is really great. The massive thing here for Klosowski that he's going for, and this is Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle, basically. This is our readings on Thursday if you want to join us. The setup for this, and it's crazy. They open up and talk about Klosowski here. And we're just going to end up moving over, but like for Deleuze for sure. But I wish Guattari had written on Klosowski. That'd be so great. If anyone knows of it, I haven't been able to find it, but that would be awesome. But Klosowski himself like really played with this distinction they're using here, this paranoid or schizo, the certainty of the thing, the totality, all the way to the obliteration of meaning and aimlessness. He frames this, Klosowski does, as active utopia, or you could say permanent revolution. Good job, Holland. I prefer that wording. But it's kind of the same thing, and they really take a lot from this. And the way that Klosowski talks about this and sets it up, they really are going to use here to sort of extend this point fully out, so that we can talk about this and ground this materialistically. Because this is a materialist psychiatry system from the ground up. So he writes, okay? Every sovereign formation would thus have to foresee the destined moment of its disintegration. I'm going to break this up a lot because Klosowski is effectively a poet, and so every sentence has a lot in it. Every sovereign formation would thus have to foresee the destined moment of its disintegration. If you build a power structure, if you build a thing that has a totality and is hardened, like that, in order to be consistent within itself, it has to anticipate its own dissolution at some point. Its internal contradictions and tendency towards collapse have to exist. Every power structure has to be aware of that. Has to be set up in that way. This is the setup of states. This is the way that this inevitable, again, non-contingent, not contingency. We're not talking about there. We're talking about the necessity, the destined, the inevitable, these things. It plays in that direction. No formation of sovereignty, in order to crystallize, will ever endure this prise de conscience, which is becoming conscious, becoming aware, realization moment, the enlightenment moment, satori, lots of words for it, prise de conscience. For as soon as this formation becomes conscious of its imminent disintegration in the individuals who compose it, the same individuals decompose it. All Chinese emperors are crying right now. I know I'm terrible. But the setup is simple. It's actually not, this is not wild. This is a really simple setup. Power structures can survive becoming conscious of their own dissolution because this consciousness is the dissolution itself. So people are part of these groups, any of them. If you've ever been part of a group meaningfully at any level, you know this general feeling that as individuals become aware the structures disintegrating within them, they actively begin breaking it apart further. So power structures can't survive becoming aware of the dissolution, even if it has to be built into it. Because as you're aware that it might dissolve, it does. Crypto? I'm going to use crypto as the example of this because I think it's perfect. If you don't know what FUD is, fear, uncertainty, doubt, every crypto project, and it's fascist at heart, so what do you expect? Every crypto project requires everyone to be a true believer. Diamond hands, hold forever, believe in it no matter what. And the moment someone says something even slightly filled with doubt, everyone starts ostracizing them, calling them FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, FUD. And they scream at people. And it's because everyone's aware, and we know this, the moment someone goes, hey, imagine if Stephen Miller came out and said, wow, Trump's not really that great. Just that. Or let's say he said, wow, Trump is not actually the God of the universe. Which is a very rational statement. If he said that, you tell me, would that not be the fucking cascades that would begin breaking things? They need to hold that in. They need to keep it up there. Big deal. Because they know as soon as there's that crack, as soon as they feel it at all disintegrating within themselves, they actively, through just being aware of that, decompose everything. Actively. It's how you got to the end of World War II, and there weren't actually a lot of Nazis in Germany anymore. Weird, that. Weird, right? You see this a lot, actually. This is soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan or Vietnam. You see this at members of ISIS or ISIL. As soon as any crack is found and people are aware of it, the awareness dissolves immediately. By way of, I love Klosowski, by way of the circuitous route of science and art, human beings have many times revolted against this fixity. This capacity notwithstanding, the gregarious impulse in and by science caused this rupture to fail. So, science and art, and Deleuze and Guattari will go on and talk about this a lot in What is Philosophy and definitely in 1,000 Plateaus. But science and art, ever since they were things themselves, have attempted to break with fixed power structures, right? They've always talked about being their own liberatory potential, whether it's the technocrats like Obama or Musk who are actually fascists and are just like, well, science will free us from having to have this oppressive state. Or the artists who build art that's supposed to be transformative and amazing and end up also being like rapists and awful. Like, they've attempted to break with fixed power structures specifically through their own liberatory potential, which they do have, the Enlightenment, the avant-garde, the Dadaist movement, inflatables on the street, who knows? Like all these things. You're trying to break free, but it doesn't work because science itself was like rebuilt into, was integrated fully into this herd system, into this collectivity in ways that reproduced sovereign formations. The science and art communities have this. If you've been in them and you've read, go read Latour, go read people who actually care about this shit. Not people who are just anti-organized, blah, blah, but like actually people who get into it. The hierarchy and structures of power have bled into art, have bled into science, have bled into academia, these places that are always trying to extricate themselves from these things. And they do this in ways that reproduced the setup, the way that the state, the first state, the Urstadt, long ago, the first state, it faded. Like it's not like we still live under the same king or the same superstructure, but that dissolved thing somehow also found its way to exist again immediately and again and again, despite somehow we've had a state ever since the first one, but they're not the same. They're constantly being destroyed and decomposing. We haven't had a single economy. American economy is broken 4 or 5 times. You could really just line up breaks and areas and things, but somehow it's always able to recreate and rebuild its structures and things. And that's because you're goal-oriented, you fascist. He goes on to say, Klosowski goes on to say, the day humans, I just love this line, sorry. The day humans are able to behave as intentionless phenomena, for every intention at the level of the human being always obeys the laws of its conservation and its continued existence. On that day, a new creature will declare the integrity of existence. Intentionless phenomena, again, fine, it's a technically good translation, but I would argue it's instead start to behave as a phenomena without intentions. Just because it matches sort of a few other words in here. Because what they're talking about is that revolutionary capacity reaches its zenith or its point of occurrence when humans don't have intentions, when we're not being goal-oriented, when we're not dealing with things rationally or doing things rationally. That's when actually shit changes. Because human intentions are self-preserving reproductions of the existing order and our investment in power. When humans become like the reed or the wind and natural phenomena, which are aimless, the wind has no point. The tornado is not trying to destroy things. It's not the setup. A new form of existence becomes possible the moment those aims disappear. And you get to have this thing, and I love his wording here, you get to have like integrity without purpose. Reed knows a thing or two about being a Reed. Ask the guy. So he says, science demonstrates this. Now remember, again, why are goals fascist, Brooks? People ask me this. It's because they're built in the normative power structure and through investment in that power structure and thus reproduce it. This is the point of the book. We're getting to like that time where every paragraph I'm going to be saying, this is the point of the book. This is the point of the book. For science demonstrates by its very method that the means that it constantly elaborates do no more than reproduce on the outside an interplay of forces by themselves without aim or end, whose combinations obtain such and such a result. The scientific method itself shows that nature operates without purpose. Science studies causal mechanisms. We know this. We hear it all the time. They study combinations of forces and impulses, and these things produce effects, but they do so without a teleological goal or end. Science has actually discovered aimlessness at the heart of everything that exists. This is just Nietzsche, by the way, but it's good Klosowski. It's really well put. I like it. But, however, no science can develop outside a constituted social grouping. So despite the fact that go look up, science has shown there's no purpose, there's no aim, none of that. It's shown over and over, and it continually is showing more and more and more. No matter what anyone wants to say, the banana does not fit our hand because God gave us bananas. There's no point. There's total aimlessness here. But here's the problem. Science, as a thing, as a practice, as a system, all of these things can't exist as science. It doesn't exist independent of the power structure. It requires, to be done, incredible institutional support. My son bought a chemistry set. That's the closest you get to doing science outside of an institutional setting, and it's a commodity product produced by people who designed it, and it's got very specific rules for it. Go find a way to go do science without being attached to some fucking big university or some gigantic funding system or lab system or peer review system or any of it. There is a natural dependency that exists within all of science that makes science itself vulnerable to this recuperation we're talking about. It's fucking built in. All the academic sciences this is true of. Period. In order to prevent science from calling social groups back into question, these groups take science back in hand. They integrate it into the diverse industrial schemes. Its autonomy appears strictly inconceivable. So, go look at the science guys. Black Science Man is a good one. Tyson. He does this thing. He plays at this, but he doesn't show that actually that science is revolutionary potential. It's the opposite. Like STEM lords, despite being steeped in science, are the most fascist directed teleological fucks on the planet. All of them. They all want aims. They all want goals. They all want to bend it to their ways every step of the way. And this is because aimlessness threatens the social order. We just talked about that. Remember that with violence or whatever, it doesn't matter. If someone is without goal, if a thing is without goal, it bounces off of that pole. The goal and the aim is the social thing. So to prevent this from threatening it, we reintegrate science into industrial financial capitalism as applied research, technological development, R&D budgets, military budgets. Scientific autonomy at that point is basically impossible. You can't get away from it. You can't move away from it. And this is what Klosowski is talking about. A conspiracy joining together art and science presupposes a rupture of all our institutions and an upheaval of the means of production. In order for art and science, and this, they mean both. He's not like saying, oh, a little bit of science. He means like science. Go read What is Philosophy. Go read Klosowski. These guys revere science and mathematics. For art and science to like realize their revolutionary potential, they have to break fully with existing institutions. They have to completely change how the production itself is organized. This is a conspiracy, right? He uses this term because it's from Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle. And for him, for Nietzsche, the secret society of free spirits is the conspiracy, right? It's good. It's good. And this requires revolution in that sense. It requires it. Now, this one's a longer one. If some conspiracy according to Nietzsche's wish, were to use science and art in a goddamn thing. Sorry. I keep trying to adjust it so I can read, and it just does grand movements. If some conspiracy, according to Nietzsche's wish, were to use science and art in a plot whose ends were no less suspect, industrial society would seem to foil this conspiracy in advance by the kind of mise-en-scene it offers for it, under pain of effectively suffering what this conspiracy reserves for the society, i.e., the breakup of the institutional structures that mask the society into a plurality of experimental spheres, finally revealing the true face of modernity. An ultimate phase that Nietzsche saw as the end result of the evolution of societies. It's a little Fukuyama into history shit in here, by the way. It's pretty good. Queen of Swords, yes. The root of the word tech is Greek. It means art. It's a little more art than science. I've always loved that line. Science isn't always science. A little bit more art to science than science. Financial industrial capital. We live in there. How you doing? Having a fun time. It anticipates, preemptively neutralizes this revolutionary conspiracy that we're talking about. Not intentionally, again. That's not the setup. But more by offering a spectacle of art and science radicalism. Right? Sorry, it just hit me. Sometimes I read this and I go, oh, this is depressing. It's everything. Hey, has anyone here heard of AI? Has anyone here? So it's okay if you haven't. Not everyone's using it these days or talking about it. Not all of our money has gone into the world's largest bubble in the history of the world, slowly destroying us, as it again rapes children. The way that AI has come about and what it is taking art and science, and it is doing a spectacle of this radical version of it. AI art is seemingly, I'm not saying we feel this, I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just talking about, like, again, the normative take. Do you want to disagree with me if this is the normative take? I will fight you on this. The people understand it or are told it, or the news talks about it as this will change the world. It's going to upend how everything works. It's revolutionary, right? It's revolutionary. It'll change everything. It's going to do it all. But that's the thing. That's the fucking spectacle. That's the simulation of radicalism from art and science. Art and science can do this shit. Art, not AI. Art and science can build things that have no aim, that are just fucking weird and change how we deal with everything. It's amazing when that happens. But capitalism utilizes the simulation and spectacle of radicalism via recuperations to build things that seem like they're doing that. Because again, investment in power comes back around, we find that blah, 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 right? So if it fails to neutralize the radical thing, it faces the intention of Nietzsche's conspiracy. It is clearly known to be dissolving. The crack forms. The dissolution of these institutions become zones of experimentation, right? And moves us to a place of permanent revolution. This is the Nietzschean ultimate phase. The idea that society is a space of perpetual experimentation where there are no stable forms. A space of permanent revolution. I believe, and Holland agrees with me on this, so do others, that is the fourth socius. Permanent revolution. Okay? Kind of a big point to make here. Klosowski really does it well. And this last bit. In this perspective, art and science would then emerge as sovereign formations that Nietzsche said constituted the object of his counter-sociology, art and science establishing themselves as dominant powers on the ruins of institutions. So, instead of having institutions that do art and science or make it, art and science would be the formations. This sovereignty is inverted here. shifted, right? Almost as if we're shifting sovereignty to be underneath desiring production, as if we want to subjugate it. This is the setup. Non-state powers, non-hierarchized powers, experimental forces would dominate on the ruins of those old institutions as tools and resources to be pulled from. It is not about building new institutions. It's about building permanent anti-institutional forces. That is what the permanent revolution is. There you go. Everyone good? Ugh, goddamn. Sorry, I'm fucking very tired. Yes, AI is a BWO, exactly, Quat. So you nailed it. You're trying to bait me into making a bad joke, Quat. I appreciate it, but I'm not going to be doing it today. I appreciate it, but not today. That is going to be it for me today. So, on Anti-Oedipus, because it's a lot. Oof. Yeah, it's a lot. Let me see what I can do. Let's see. 2 seconds. That's going to be it for AO today. If you want to bounce, you can. I'm going to take a moment and yeah, go ahead, please.
I don't know how much longer you intend to stick around to answer this question, because I figure it could get kind of long if you wanted it to. But I've been watching a lot of your videos, and I've been really interested in sort of like, I picked up on how you think about metaphor analogy, and like you tend to prefer the structural and like functional aspects of things to be analogized, and prefer to avoid like the symbolic substitution side of things. And you also have a pretty strong sense of like, it's very valuable to you that people read things in a manner that is fairly accurate to probably the original intention, but also in a sense that they seem to grasp the like functional and structural like intention of like, basically that they're able to refer to similar processes using the things that they learn from what they read, right?
Yeah, it's tough to talk about because I don't believe in original intention. So it makes it very difficult to have this conversation, because I don't really give a fuck what Deleuze intended. Like that's almost like a divining rod thing of like, oh, he meant to say this. Like, no, it's to me, when someone's writing, especially if there's someone who I would argue Deleuze, Guattari for most of his work, not all of it. Deleuze for most of his work, not all of it. Nietzsche for most of his work, not all of it, is very particular about the sentence they literally write down. Because for someone like Deleuze to write a word literally caused him pain because of how his fingers work. So like, he's not doing frivolous wording here. This isn't Moby Dick, right? Everything has a reason he puts it down. He had some intention. What his intention was, I don't really give a shit, but that he had some is a big deal. So the order of words, as a thing that sort of goes step, 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 the order of a thing as we sort of get there, that's the stuff for me is like that original text is important to keep moving and keep going. And the moment you add, and in translation, they do this a lot, when you try to make something more digestible because something is tougher to literally get across, and there's some you have to do that. To me, it's important to default to almost unreadability, which sounds weird, but if I make something more digestible for someone, I've changed the original text. If I've made it so it's as close as possible to the original, then you're there. And that's where we get into something like flow or flux. And if you hear me read, you'll hear me bitch about how flux versus couler in French, and how they just translate flux as flow, because technically flux is a flow. But it's like you're missing why he would choose one word over the other, like he didn't intend to. And I've had this argument with a couple of people who are known translators now, who have lovely podcasts who I really like, who said it's not a big deal and it doesn't matter which one you use, which sounds absurd to me, because if that was the case, why is it that Deleuze always used one word in one way and one word in another? I don't give a fuck what his reason was, but he did that. That's the thing that's there. So our ability to sort of look back, and this is why I would argue the same is true of why I treat this as the same way I would treat art. A painter, I don't care why they put a stripe in a certain place, or a mark of a paint, or a color of a certain shade. Like, their reasons are fine. You could, there's some extraordinary paintings, some of my favorites that are exceptionally abstract, but every single thing in that was done for a reason. And if I take away stuff, I take a photo of, for example, a beautiful oil painting that removes the texture, and I also shrink it down to about 5 inches, it's a perfect reproduction. But he didn't take a photo. He didn't use a two-dimensional thing. The dude painted. And that painting, as he made it, is what is intended to be experienced by a person for him. And that's the thing to go back to, for me, every single time.
That makes sense. I feel like there's an odd tension when trying to go back to that stuff where, like, if I were to learn Greek, right, and then I go back and read Homer's I'm going to be almost as confused as
people who go to China and they learn how to read Mandarin, for example, and then they're like, awesome, let me pick up the original Taoist texts and scrolls, and they're like, what the living fuck, because it doesn't, like, language changes so much over time. Exactly. And that's why, like, it comes with the second half. And I'm fortunate here, not only do we have a lot of old people who speak French, but we have people who actually understand the nuances of the language, but also understand the weird references because they are contemporaneous with Deleuze and other things. And a lot of it comes from that. Red Pine is very, to me, inspirational for how he does his Eastern translations into English. He's exceptionally painfully literal, to the point where the words, if you compare his version of the Tao Te Ching, just the first stanza with the first stanza of anyone else's, he's broken what everyone else does. But it's because, and he explains and he outlines. And I think that's what, if you're going to be translating, having those notes, the same way that, and again, I go to the painting, and again, not as metaphor, but as example. If I take, what is the guy who did the two-tone pieces? Oh my God, his name. It's my favorite painting I've ever seen in person. Not Las Meninas. That's actually my favorite. God damn it.
Are you talking about Rothko?
Rothko, thank you. There's a Rothko that's black and gray that he painted when his son died. And even without knowing that, there is a weird emotion that comes over you when you see the painting in person. The way the oil strokes exist, you can look at them, and the way it's so fucking surreal. And if I were to take a photo of that and put that in a book, and I were to say, this is exactly Rothko, don't look any further, I would be a really bad art historian. A good art historian would go, this is actually a photograph of Rothko's piece. It is actually stands at this level, and here is how the oil, like, you would have the other descriptors. I see no reason why that wouldn't be the case for a translation. A translation should be deeply annotated. That's why we're doing the annotated Oedipus. It should be deeply explanatory, and you should have everything in there, because if I'm right or wrong, that's great. The words are irrelevant. The question is the person who's reading it going to be coming across, at least in some way, the original text, and how close we can get to that without telling the person, go learn French and go live in France in 1950 and 60.
That makes sense. I have very, very similar thoughts about sort of like how language works and how we can like try to understand what people in the past were saying when we no longer, or I guess even it's the case that in a single point in time, two people speaking French are not speaking the same language necessarily, right? Especially if they're in different like subcultures, or if they speak like one of them is a medical doctor, happens to know a bunch of like medical French terminology, for example, right? And so I think My question is kind of like, because this is something I'm myself trying to deal with, like figuring out what I mean when I say correct or like good interpretation, for example. It's like, would you say that if somebody writes the instructions on how to draw a square, right, in English, and then somebody translates it into French, and then I'm reading the French one, and then I am able to draw a square afterwards through following the instructions, is that sort of what you mean when you say like a good interpretation?
I think it's again, I would use the art as the example where it's like, because a lot of this it's not as bad as like saying, oh, I'm going to have to describe Rothko to a blind person, but it's not wildly different than that. Because as soon as you are being the person who is now a medium, you are communicating, you are trying to get ideas across that, one, are not yours, and two, in words that are not the original, in art or medium that is not the original, you need to be aware of that.
Sorry, it cut out for the last second there.
You need to be aware that you are the medium at that point.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And if you don't know Rothko, I'm actually going to just I'll post a video in there. If you haven't seen it, Will. Rothko is, the paintings, 2D doesn't do it justice. It's hard to sort of talk about how it feels to see them in person. Especially at the scale, and I don't know. I found it, I actually was like personally overcome. I found it was one of those things that just hit me, and I don't know why. I actually cannot explain it. But it's like Las Meninas, when you see it, the images you see in a book, even in the order of things, Foucault's book, where I still think is maybe the best thing ever written on it. It says a lot. But if you're not standing in front of it, which is 100% what was originally meant by it, you do not understand how absolutely you just blend and fall into this painting in a really fucking weird way. And that translation between that experience and a printing page in a book, even if you're as good as Foucault at describing it, you have to do that level of work to get it across. That's what I'd say, probably. Rothko's crazy. If you ever get a chance to see a Rothko in person, you should find out if there's one in your area right now. Wherever you live, they're everywhere. Like, these things fucking scattered like a motherfucker. But if you can see one, it is hands down one of the best ways to sort of understand what I'm talking about if you can see it in person. But that's it. I got to run. Operation Inflation, if you haven't heard about it, operationinflation.com. If you're interested in supporting, we are basically doing not far from what I think is the right thing, which is random, insane things and seeing what happens. And we are dressing people up and providing free inflatable costumes for anyone who wants one at any protest. Slowly growing and becoming something bigger. And it's been a full-time job for me for the last 10 days. But we've given out 300 costumes, 200 alone on No Kings here in Portland, and we're expanding more, so it's going to be fun. That's what I've been doing. So I'm trying to figure out how to do more streams. Trust me, I miss the philosophy stuff, and I need this in my brain to keep me going and keep me thinking. But it's a lot. Be watching for a few more live streams downtown, but I've got to get running. I got work to do. And no quote, we haven't gotten any Soros Dark money yet, sadly. At some point, I hope to completely sell out. That would be lovely. So I could just do this full time. Sell out with me. Oh yeah, sell out. With that, I'm going to bounce the fuck out of here and say, as always, as a highlight of my week, thank you all. If you want to support what I do in the QC, patreon.com/DGQC. Or if you want to join us live, you can always. Discord.gg/DGQC. And all of you who are in Discord, you can keep staying. I don't care where you go. You can stay here. That's great. But I am bouncing the fuck out. And for everyone else, I will see you soon enough.